Victoria, is everything all right? People talk, say things.
Hello?
Why didn't you tell me it was out of order? I suppose you think that's funny.
I'm not allowed out the front door.
Who says you weren't?
Them.
Who?
Them.
It was terrible out there. I could hear breathing.
We told you.
Are you worried about the man?
They hate us. That's the truth. They want to kill and torture every one of us. You can see it in their eyes.
Come now, Frederick. Do you dream about unholy things?
I really don't like what's going on here. There's something wrong, and that's a fact.
Wait. What did you dream last night? This manifestation of evil. You must be delivered from evil.
I don't think you're gonna love my new job.
You can't expect your uncle to start you out at the top.
Janie, I never said anything about Uncle Louis giving me a job.
I don't understand. You walked away from the department and a good paycheck. Why else?
You know what I've always talked about.
Remind me.
Well, think about it. You should know me better than anybody. We are engaged.
Well, I know what you've always talked about doing, but it's so impractical. A little boy's dream.
Thanks for the show of confidence.
It's just not realistic. These days, particularly.
Well, it's what I'm doing.
A private detective. You're going to be a private detective.
Not going to be. I am one.
Did you even think about asking your Uncle Louis for a job?
Not really.
I mean, why? Why did you quit the department anyway? Over that awful shooting? These things happen.
I hadn't told her the whole story yet, what really transpired up at Nitty's handbook. But now I did. By the end of it, she was angry.
They just came into Barney's and grabbed you. Didn't even tell you what they were up to. Louses, bums. And I suppose they expect you to testify for them at the Nitty trial.
I will testify for them.
Then why quit then? If you'd stayed with the department and testified, you could get something out of it. Why help them cover it up and get nothing?
I am getting something out of it. A private investigator's license and a gun permit. So I can do business. Mayor Cermak himself guaranteed it.
Oh, Mayor Cermak. Well, that's different.
I told her about the Cermak meeting, and it impressed her. And I told her about the Nitty hospital visit, and that scared her. But when I told her about General Dawes, she perked back up.
Why don't you take advantage of the general's offer? $3,000 is like $1 million.
$3,000 for supervising pickpocket security at the fair would be easy money. It'd make my first year in business a rousing success, even if not a single other client walked in the door.
And it would be just the beginning. You get something much better out of Dawes and your uncle. You could get a real job with a bank or a business or something.
Janie, I do have a real job. I am in business. I'm president of the A1 Detective Agency. I'll be first in the yellow pages.
Where do I fit in? What about the house we talked about?
Look, I still have the nest egg money in the bank. I managed to start up the A1 without dipping into that, thanks to Barney's largesse.
How does Barney factor into this?
I told her about my arrangement with him for the office space, playing night watchman, about the furnishings he'd provided, the works.
He's a good friend.
Give me a year to get my feet under me and we could start looking for that house.
It's not like there aren't foreclosures available.
Happy now?
Happy. Nathan, you know I only want what's best for you.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema. I still love this. Your collector. I love this poster. I got it for the 1000th show. Of course, your evangelist of the imagination and maybe the never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's what John Campea called me. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Rob casting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 1006. Yeesh. I can't even believe I've had that much to say in my entire life, but apparently I have. First of all, I want to thank everybody for the last two shows I did on the Superman trailer, both pre and post. A lot of really thoughtful commentary, a lot of people with varying points of view. But, before those Superman shows, I was going to do this show about the position that movies have in our culture and where we're at with film. Because, look, I've said many times on this show that I think that cinema was the art form of the 20th century. It couldn't have existed without technology. That the beginnings of that technology were like the zoetrope created in the early 1800s, and then we saw the development of film and the idea of figuring out you could have a succession of still frames projected one right after the other because of the way our eyesight is built. Persistence of vision creates the illusion of movement. And in the early part of the 1900s, we had the first features. And of course, by the time it got to 1927, the advent of sound. And as technology increased, so did movies. And what I always loved about film was it was sort of the distillation of all of the art forms that came before it. Everything from sculpture to movement to literature, acting, theater, all of it. And you had the added benefit of technology. And so as technology got better in the 20th century, like the advent of recorded sound, suddenly what was a silent medium, a silent moving medium where you had a live organist playing, became something entirely different. And what I said before a couple weeks back about movies that were, I think, one of the most important things, it was one of the first times, or it was the first time, that humanity was able to look at representations of itself that moved, and sort of cinema lived and breathed. And suddenly we saw human life reflected back at us much in the same way that we were living it. And one of the things that I've talked about and sort of being obsessed with is that the way human sight works, one, we don't even see all of the spectrum of lights, or light spectrum, color spectrums that exist. And we are stuck into a fixed focal length, or we don't have zoom lenses and all of that. And one of the things that film did was it allowed us to see the world differently than we are locked into seeing it, simply because different lenses show us the world in different ways. Wide angle, macro, and it really changed the way human perception of the world was able to be presented. I mean, our perception was changed through the art of cinema. Also, I mean, things like optics, telescopes, those kinds of things added to that. But, I've always been obsessed with film since I was a little kid, but I've also been obsessed with how did film change us, change mankind. And as I got older, I got really obsessed with foreign cinema. And it was sort of, you could watch Asian cinema, you could watch Indian films, you could watch Russian films, French films, Italian films, films from all over the world, and they were all slightly different. And the way life was portrayed in those films was very different. I think Major Chai Chai was in the chat, and she took me up on the challenge to watch Antonioni's Ennui trilogy, which I'm rather obsessed with. And I've made the point that if we, as Americans, especially today, try and go and watch those movies, they're a difficult sit. It's hard to watch them. You have to sort of put yourself in a mindset. There's stories told those stories are told in very different ways, and they have different concerns about how to convey, well, what is life all about? Federico Fellini, if you watch things like La Strada, or you watch 8½, or that's a whole different way of looking at the world. Amélie, Jean-Pierre Jeunet's Amélie, one of my favorite movies, but it was a very French way to distill my own worldview. And I was really impacted by it when I saw it over 20 years ago. I saw it in Spain when I was at a film festival. The same day I saw Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Pulse at the Sitges Film Festival. And both of those movies I'm huge fans of. You know, I'm a huge fan of those films, and I got to see a Japanese film and a French film in the same day. One was essentially an existential, modern, technologically based ghost story that freaked the fuck out of me. And the other was this buoyant, joyous movie about everyday life that was yet filled with a sense of wonder. And I don't think I've ever, even though Amélie Poulain was not somebody I knew, I didn't know anybody like her, she was a character I totally identified with, because my whole life I've found wonder in sometimes the smallest things. I mean, to me, everything, there's always a sense of wonder. I mean, you know, Band-Aids. You know, Band-Aids that come in the you know, the tin, you know, the box. They're still in the same box they were when I was a kid, like a metal tin. And they had a top that would flip open, even though it was the wrong shape. I would take those Band-Aid boxes. Sometimes I would empty the box and just leave the Band-Aids in the cupboard, which drove my mom insane. But suddenly I had a flip top and I could use it as a communicator. A Band-Aid box, it's a communicator. It wasn't the right size, but then I could tape white paper around it and draw a Star Trek communicator on it and carry it around and flip it open. So I was always looking for, I don't know, the awe and wonder in the universe, whether it was on the grand scale or the mundane or the everyday life. And while I've explained on this show, I watched a lot of genre cinema when I was smaller. As I started to grow older, I was more interested in learning about life through cinema. Like I told you all before on the show, I used to love watching movies about grungy New York of the 70s. And there was an aesthetic there, whether it was The French Connection, whether it was Network, whether it was Marathon Man, whether it was 3 Days of the Condor, whether it was The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, whatever it was, you watched a movie about the 70s in New York, it all kind of looked the same. And then genre movies, as I got older, like I've said, Abel Ferrara's Driller Killer or Frank Henlotter's Basket Case, or of course one of my favorite movies of the world, The Warriors, Walter Hill's The Warriors. You know, it showed me a world that I couldn't see in Seattle, Washington. And then, while I still love science fiction, fantasy, and horror movies, they weren't my favorite movies because, and this is not a criticism, they might have been existential or they might have been philosophical, but they weren't immediately about the world that I was inhabiting. You know, like, what I loved about horror, and I say this to people and they think I'm nuts, but horror is, I think, a very optimistic genre, even though it's full of gore and blood and death and hopefully some good sex. What's cool about horror is it's really about the prevailing of humanity. Hopefully, mankind in a horror situation, somebody prevails. A final girl will live. Ripley will survive. The alien will be blown out the airlock of the Narcissus, you know, and she will escape. And so I always liked horror movies because people prevailed. You know, the monsters were vanquished. I thought that was inherently a positive thing. And then, of course, science fiction movies were always about looking forward. I mean, yeah, we had a lot of dystopian science fiction films in the 70s because Vietnam was on our TV screens at night. But movies really mattered to me. And I saw them as a window into the world that I wanted to inhabit. You know, I remember seeing films, you know, my mom accidentally took us to The Deer Hunter. I'm like, oh my God, I think I was, when did that come out? 79, 78? I was clearly a little too young to see The Deer Hunter, but I saw it. That was kind of true about a lot of the movies I saw. But, you know, when I was 12, not only did I see Star Trek The Motion Picture, which became my favorite Star Trek movie and still is, I also saw movies like Bob Fosse's All That Jazz, which had an incredible impact on me and still does to this day. And really, not only did Joe Gideon's life fascinate me, I could tell that guy, like I said, loved women, loved movies, loved his work. I'm like, I could be that guy when I grow up. Maybe not such a philanderer, but, you know, it was great. And then at the same time, I loved movies like The Verdict, Paul Newman in The Verdict, which I talk about because one man, one underdog, one burnt-out soul that thinks he's born to lose and has nothing to live for, finds redemption. And at the same time, I was going to see all different kinds of movies. Movies that were about comedies, dramas. I mean, I would go see just about anything. And of course, yes, did I love horror and science fiction and fantasy films? Of course, because that iconography mattered a lot to me. But the thing about those movies was, as much as I love them, they didn't have a lot to teach me about life that I would be leading. It was all escapist fare. But going to the movies growing up, I mean, when you would see Ordinary People, you know, a lot of people forget about that movie, but it was a cause célèbre at the time, and talking about fractured families, or Kramer versus Kramer, a movie about divorce. And that was something a lot of my friends' parents had gone through. My parents hadn't split up yet, but that was something that told me a little bit about what my friends might have been experiencing or what they were seeing, something I hadn't seen, but it gave me insight into what they might be going through. So movies were something that mattered to me more than anything. And also books too. You know, I read a lot of literature, but I read a lot of course, genre fiction. I read a lot of mainstream fiction too, but, you know, I did read a lot of dark fantasy and science fiction and regular fantasy. But movies were the thing that really taught me about the world. And at the same time, it was the studios that were putting a lot of these movies out. Art house cinema, you know, was usually relegated to foreign films, or indie movies weren't where they were in, say, the late 80s and 90s. Art house cinema was usually revival cinema, or it was foreign films. But the studios, the output from the studios, they were making not only the biggest grossing movies, but the movies that were most relevant to culture. They were adapting great novels. They had great satirists working. You know, somebody like Patty Chayefsky making or writing Network. You know, that was a huge, or directors like Sidney Lumet, who were incredibly versatile, but would tackle the social issues of the day and put them in an interesting context. But the studios were the purveyors of all of this. The big studios were the best at making the movies about everyday life. They were the best at making thrillers, erotic thrillers, noirs. I mean, the studios did it all. And people still looked up and looked at the studios to be the purveyors of culture. And that was what movies were. And that was why people went to the movies, I think, because they wanted to see reflections of the lives they were leading, the lives they wanted to lead, the lives they are glad they weren't leading. But there were also movies, I mean, people talk about like social justice today. There was always social justice happening in movies. And you would go and it would seem, you know, natural. Nobody was forcing these issues down your throat, but they were presented in a matter-of-fact way, and ultimately they had lessons in them, but they were first and foremost great stories. And I loved issue-oriented films. I remember going to see a movie called A Soldier's Story that was directed, I think, Norman Jewison, which was a great movie about race relations in the military. One of my favorite, I love legal thrillers. That's probably why I went and saw The Verdict. But before that, Norman Jewison made a movie with Al Pacino called And Justice for All. Great speeches, and it's very much a satire of the legal system. But Al Pacino gives a great speech at the end. You're out of order. The whole court is out of order. And I was a kid. And I loved this stuff. I just loved it all because I loved humanity. And I loved learning about humanity. I loved historical movies. I loved biblical epics. You know, love Lawrence of Arabia. All of these things. Today, movies don't have that anymore. Studios aren't making movies like that anymore. The idea that a studio would make 10 different movies in 10 different genres has gone away. Now, admittedly, movies they cost $5, $10, $15, $20 million. It wasn't really up until the late 80s that movies got really expensive. And of course, in the 90s, Terminator 2 was the first $100 million movie, but partly that was the R&D Cameron was doing with effects technology, and it was made on a very compressed schedule. So, for the most part, studios in the 70s and the 80s, and to a certain extent most of the 90s, the business was manageable. They didn't have to hit a home run every time. But what I just loved was the diversity of material. And some studios would get known for certain things. Paramount made a lot of adult-oriented thrillers. I mean, Fatal Attraction came out in, 87? Ridley Scott made Black Rain, which I think came out in 88, 89. And Paramount was kind of known for that. Other studios were known for different things. But it was a really rich landscape that was very thought-provoking for someone like myself. And, I love the escapist fare, but I also love the movies that... I remember seeing The Killing Fields when I was a senior in high school. Both Roland Joffe's The Killing Fields came out. That was about Dith Pran, Dr. Hang Nor, and talked about how he escaped from Vietnam, Cambodia. Really moving, very harsh film. I love that same year it came out, Amadeus, that won Best Picture. I loved me some Amadeus, and thank God they're finally releasing a brand new version of Amadeus, the theatrical cut, because that Blu-ray we've suffered with for a long time was terrible. But I remember seeing Amadeus and just being blown away. I loved movies about musicians, the music lovers, just all of those things. But now I feel that our culture, obviously, it's a very different culture. And I'm trying not to be... I don't want to get down on things because things change and evolve all the time. But what's really happened, the real difference in our culture is, especially our youth culture, which was looking outward, is now looking inward. And to be a movie fan was to look out. And now, user-generated content, what I'm doing right now, I mean, you could be watching a movie that you haven't seen before, but instead you're here with me. And I thank you for that. But maybe I hope that some of these things, I mean, one of the great things I love when I do these shows is when people say to me, I watched this, or I read this, or I listened to that, which, makes me happy. That's when Major Chai Chai took me up on reading Antonio or watching Antonioni's Ennui trilogy. I love that. But there's a lot of articles and there's a lot of things that I want to get to. This is probably going to be a long, rambling show. But why I wanted to do this show, a good friend of mine and somebody I've known for a long time, but, we've gotten much closer over the last couple of years. Real impressive guy. We share an interest in the horror genre, but he's a musician, and he's doing a lot of work. He's done a lot of work online. He collects movies, and he's as a different job now. He works in film booking. So I'm getting a perspective of the industry that I've never had before from somebody who is dealing with studios and putting their movies in movie theaters and how that's all working. Well, I want to start tonight by reading an article that I thought was pretty shocking after something I'd heard just the other day. And here's the article I want to start with. Gladiator II, available to purchase in home on Christmas Eve. This was published today. Anthony D'Alessandro, who we read all the time on Let's Get Physical Media. After a 33-day theatrical window. Now, as we all know, this film was reported to have a $350 million budget, one of the most expensive movies ever made. It's been in theaters for a month. Not a 45-day window, but 33 days. After a 33-day theatrical window, filmmaker Ridley Scott's Gladiator II is hitting digital on December 24th. The movie has amassed well north of $400 million at the global box office. This weekend in the States alone during its fifth week, the Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal Gladiator movie is expected to make $4.2 million at 2,397 theaters for a running total of $153 million domestic. Those who purchase the film on digital or 4K Ultra HD will have access to over 100 minutes of behind-the-scenes footage and interviews which canvass the exotic filming locations in Malta and Morocco. Boy, I certainly hope they show up on the physical media. And then it talks about the bonus content that you can get. The sequel will also be available on digital as part of a 2-movie collection with the original Gladiator, and will arrive on 4K Ultra HD in a 4K Ultra HD Steelbook and on DVD March 4th, 2025. Gladiator II is up for 2 Golden Globes, including Cinematic and Box Office Achievement and Supporting Feature Actor for Denzel Washington. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, that sounds, but 33 days. But now let me tell you something. Let me explain something that's also going on. Gladiator II is still in theaters. And there are all different kinds of theaters in the United States. When I was at CinemaCon, I met I talked to a lot of independent theater owners all around America. Outside of the cities, there's lots of rural areas or smaller towns that have great independent theaters. And sometimes they can only book 1 movie or 2 movies, or sometimes, in a state like Oklahoma, there might be a rep here, a film rep that's putting movies in theaters in Oklahoma. So say, for instance, you have a 4-plex in Oklahoma for this Christmas weekend, okay? And we've got Moana making money, Wicked making money. You've got Sonic 3 coming out, which is a family-oriented film. But there's still other movies in theaters, like Gladiator II. Well, here's something that the studios will do when they talk to all the bookers that are putting movies around. The people that work at the studios, or somebody that works at Amazon or Apple or anybody, they're reporting to their bosses. And they want to make sure that their movies are in theaters making the most amount of money they can. But the thing is, not all movie theaters are equal. Depending on where you are in the country, certain movies do better than others. Certain racial, ethnic demographics, they're interested in different things. One thing that being a movie booker will teach you is not all communities are equal. And different interests, religious interests, social interests. So certain films, certain subject matter plays better in different theaters. Well, the thing about that is those companies, the movie theater owners and the bookers, they're all aware of this. But at the studio level, or at Amazon, MGM, and Apple, they don't care. They just know that they want their movies in a certain amount of theaters. They want their films playing theatrically. And a lot of the time, it's not even necessarily based on economics. It's just, it could be ego. It could be a studio person has to report to somebody above them and they need to keep a movie in a theater playing for however long. And there's all kinds of negotiations that happen. Sometimes they'll be able to, a booker is trying to keep his movie theater owners happy by making sure that the movies they get in those theaters are making money. And if some don't, they might have to split shows. They'll have 1 movie playing in the afternoons, or there might only be 2 shows of 1 movie and 3 movies of another, or 3 shows of another movie in the same screen, trying to maximize the dollars. And a lot of the time, some movies wind up dead on arrival. Sometimes movies have already been played in a theater and they're not doing any more business. But the studio expects the booker to keep a movie in a screen because their boss wants to make sure that a movie is still playing theatrically, even though that movie might not be drawing anybody in to that theater. And it costs about $1,000 to run a theater screen a week. And if a movie might be, say, making $800 for an entire week, it's not even covering the cost of keeping the theater open. But then the owner of the theater has to absorb that cost. The booker is being asked by the owner of the theater, hey man, can you get me another movie? We can't, it's not making any more money. But the studio is putting pressure on the booker to keep the film in a screen. So everybody is working at cross purposes. The studios are not particularly interested in the health of a local theater chain owner. Really, everybody, it's the same ecosystem, should be interested in how everyone else is doing. But it's not that way. Because in the corporate world, and unfortunately, what's happened to movies, and movies have always been this way, I just, I put them on a pedestal. Movies are widgets. They're Coca-Cola. They're a bag of Doritos. They're just a product to be sold. And in our corporate environment, where there's been mergers and acquisitions and Wall Street plays such a big part, their only interest is in profitability, which I understand. But the problem with that is there's people working at the studios that they used to be the head of Coca-Cola, or they were the head of Xerox, or they were the head of a paper company. And because they look good on paper, they suddenly wind up running a studio. What do they know about storytelling? What do they know about movies? But it doesn't matter, because at the corporate level on a spreadsheet, they look like, oh, okay, we can hire this person because they know how to make the widgets. It doesn't matter what the widget is. But I would dare say that when your product is a story that is supposed to connect with an audience, look, when you crack open a Coca-Cola, you know what it's going to taste like. You understand how to sell that. But when you're making a movie that's supposed to touch an audience, whether it's physically, with excitement, or emotionally with something that gets you in the heart, or something that's provocative, maybe a social issue, how does somebody who came over from Pitney Bowes understand how to sell an emotional or an experiential experience, as John Campea likes to say, to an audience? They don't. And the people that run the studios now, that are even picking what movies are going to get made, are not making them based on their gut instincts. They're making them on analytics, which are telling them things that have already happened. And as I've said on this show, no one gets rich in Hollywood following a trend. People get rich in Hollywood by setting them. But nowadays, we don't have anybody at the top that knows how to set trends, because that takes guts. That takes understanding. That takes a knowledge of the zeitgeist and what's happening now. And the problem is, movie theater owners are the recipients of those experiential events. All they can do is play what the studios give them. And they're on the receiving end. They're right there where the customer is. They want to provide an experience. Hopefully it's good projection and good sound, great popcorn. But if the audience is unsatisfied or disinterested with what the studio gives them, then a studio is not providing a business owner that owns a movie theater. He can't do business, or she can't do business, or they can't do business if they're not getting from the studios that experience that moviegoers want to have. And there's a bit of a disconnect. And now the studios have tried to mitigate their risks. As costs have gone up, they have to mitigate their risks. So they're even less inclined to work with the movie theater owners or theater chain owners or anything. So you have this sort of dysfunctional relationship, whereas the movie theater business is entirely reliant on people that aren't really sure how to make the experiences or provide the experiences that movie theater owners are supposed to give to their patrons, which is kind of weird if you really think about it. And I think that Hollywood right now works less in terms of providing those things than it ever has. Sure, you can have a movie like, do you think Wicked's success came because somebody said, hey, we're going to make... No, Wicked was already a known quantity. To make Wicked into a movie was the most risk-averse thing ever. That's why IPs are so popular. All you have to do is find something that worked well in one medium and translate it into a movie, and you've got that built-in audience. And they don't even think, well, we better not fuck it up. Who are we going to get? Luckily, John Cho directed Wicked, and it all worked out well. But the people at the studio level, they don't even know. I mean, they're just looking at analytics provided to them. There's no gutsy studio moguls. I would say Kevin Feige is one. You know, when Marvel was at its height, Kevin Feige was making great choices. James Gunn, $2-3 million movies. Kevin Feige's like, nope, I'm going to pick that guy. He knows what he's doing. Here's $150 million. Go make me Guardians of the Galaxy. It was not that easy, but it was synergistic. But he made that call. There's not a lot of people in Hollywood that have that power or that foresight or insight into making that call. But in the meantime, you've got theater owners that last week were forced, in some instances, to keep Gladiator II in their theaters through Christmas because some Paramount rep said you got to keep it in that theater. And they're like, okay. And then a Deadline article comes out today, and it says that after 33 days, Gladiator II is going on to streaming in VOD. Well, you've got the movie theater owner left holding the bag. Is he still going to have an audience to come in and see Gladiator 2 over the Christmas? I mean, what if they wanted? They could have added Sonic 3, another screen with Sonic 3, another Paramount movie. Paramount could have been honest and said, hey, we're going to make this decision, but I'll bet you the reps that were booking those movies didn't even know that they were going to do that. Put the movie up for VOD because people aren't talking to one another. But anyway, let me read another article I wanted to share with y'all. I don't know why now this was an article I found, and I did not put this on the screen, so I'm just gonna have to read this live. This is from Phil Cook and philcook.com, helping creative leaders influence the world. And this was written on February 28th, 2016. It's a short one. I just finished the Oscars alone, sitting in the concierge lounge at a hotel. Not that I don't watch lots of things from a hotel because I travel so much, but for some reason, this year made me realize how little I cared. But it wasn't always that way. Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal was mesmerizing back in college. An atheist who honestly portrayed his struggle with faith captivated me. Then it was David Lean's epic Lawrence of Arabia that really made me understand what a camera was capable of capturing. In those days, films had a remarkable impact on culture. I'll never forget the horse's head in the bed from The Godfather. I suggested my parents see Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid until I remembered Catherine Ross undressing. When they came home, I thought my mom would kill me. Remember The Graduate? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or The Deer Hunter? And during that period, filmmakers like John Cassavetes were literally inventing the independent film movement. Back then, movies really mattered. They dictated cultural norms, helped give a generation a voice, and were the dictionary definition of influence. But now, we live in a far more disjointed, distracted culture. Water cooler conversations is far more likely to focus on TV shows, like Breaking Bad or the latest mobile app. Young people follow other gamers on Twitch more than they follow talented film directors. In the past, a significant part of the enjoyment of a movie was in the communal nature of the screening. All those people sitting in the dark watching the screen was something akin to a religious experience. But today, we have a generation who doesn't even know how to behave in a movie theater. I've lost count of the number of people I've asked to turn off their phone or to stop talking. It's easier and far less stressful to just watch an HD screen in my bedroom. And how much cultural impact can you really have when the mainstream movie industry admits the target audience has become 14-year-old boys? And these days, I don't think not even that. 14-year-old boys aren't interested in movies. They're interested in Twitch and gaming and user-generated content that perhaps they themselves are making for TikTok. And apparently I'm not the only one who's lost interest. I haven't seen the ratings from last night yet, but last year's drop in Oscar viewers, a new low of 37.3 million viewers in 2015, and remember that was 9 years ago, was obviously an indicator that something had changed. And the uproar over diversity in this year's films was telling as well. After all the grandstanding from a handful of stars, it only generated contempt from Chris Rock during the actual show. Other years, black people didn't protest the Oscars because they were too busy being graped and lynched to care about who won Best Cinematographer. When your grandmother's swinging from a tree, it's really hard to care about Best Documentary Foreign Short. I remember that. Chris Rock is one of the best. The bottom line is, for all the promotion, publicity, and celebrities on the red carpet, the film industry simply isn't influencing the culture as it did. But the question becomes, what is influencing the culture today? I like that. I like finding that from back in 2016 and how not much has changed. It's only gotten worse. Now, I have no problem with culture. Culture has changed throughout history. And when you look at how technology and new technology replaces an old technology, and the old technology can disappear and fade away. Hey, I thought vinyl was gone for good. It was killed pretty quickly. Look, the Laserdisc is not coming back. I don't know why people collect VHS tapes, because the image is terrible. NTSC, our video format that we had here in the United States, was garbage. It was always garbage. It was worse than the European standard. I don't even know why we went with it. But, you know, I understand VHS tapes, I collected them. I worked in video myself, but the nostalgia is there, and there are a lot of programs that are on VHS that have never been ported over to any other format. I get all that. I don't mean to distress all of you VHS collectors. But, you know, I keep thinking about what went on with the James Gunn trailer and what's still been going on for the last 24 hours. And it's like before, like when I was growing up, in the olden times, we as fans, when we were getting something new, what was really interesting was like, I wonder what it's going to be like. You didn't really compare or contrast things because you kind of loved it all, and there wasn't as much to compare and contrast with. We all went into everything eyes open, hoping it was all going to be great. I was never cynical about a movie I was going to see when I was growing up. You know, I was just happy to see anything. You know, science fiction, fantasy, horror. If somebody was making an epic superhero movie, I would have been deliriously excited no matter what. Hell, when they were making Steel with Shaquille O'Neal, I was kind of excited for that because, you know, the reign of the Superman storyline with the Eradicator and Steel, John Henry and all that. I like that storyline. So did I think it was wild? I mean, Shaq, of course, not an actor, but they cast him in something like that. It's like, okay, I was actually kind of excited because I like that storyline in the comics. But yesterday, I talked a lot about the Snyder Cut films and his trilogy, which I liked. But reading a lot of the commentary about James Gunn's Superman, I thought to myself, well, I liked all three Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I liked Slither. I liked Super. You know, I liked what he's done. And yet, what's really interesting is all of this comparing and contrasting. And it's not just the Snyder Bros and their love of Zack Snyder's imagery, but now it's like I feel that for me, what James Gunn is doing is he's making a fantasy-based Superman movie, the likes of which we've never seen before. My favorite word, verisimilitude. When Richard Donner was making Superman, the movie in '78, he had to make all audiences believe a man could fly. And the thing was, even in The Adventures of Superman in the 50s, they made Superman believable. You know, we were in real office spaces. We understood. And obviously, when we saw Zack Snyder's Superman, it was also, there was peak verisimilitude. We're here on Earth. It's our world today. And the fantastical represented by Superman, when he wasn't being Superman, he was a person interacting with real people in a normal way. Whereas James Gunn's movie is something that we've never got before. There's a world of super science. There's giant monsters. There's corporately owned superheroes. I guess Maxwell Lord's Justice League, you know, embodied by Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner. They're corporate heroes. The way Booster Gold was originally presented, a corporate hero. He had corporate sponsorships. And there's things that we're going to see in that world that we haven't seen before in a big budget Superman movie. And that alone makes it interesting for me to watch. And now we're at a place where people are hating on the actor playing Superman literally because of the clothes he's wearing. It's no longer about what Superman embodies or what the movie's actually going to be about. It's you're immediately comparing and contrasting something that we haven't even seen yet with something in the past that at the time was divisive and people liked it or didn't like it. And no one is thinking, wow, this is interesting. This is new. I wonder where this is going to go. You know, it's already, it doesn't impress me. I haven't been blown away by the 2.5 minutes of footage and text I saw on the screen. And it's funny because as fans of superhero movies, we've been saying this shit since Tim Burton's Batman. It hasn't changed. Heath Ledger could never be the Joker. But the curiosity, I think that one of the problems with our culture now is we're not seekers, first of all, but we don't have a sense of awe and wonder anymore. Maybe because we know too much about the movie making process, maybe because over the last 20 years, movies have become far more disappointing than they ever used to be. I remember going to see movies I didn't love when I was a kid, but I never felt a crushing sense of disappointment. I'm like, that was okay. You know, I wanted it to be better, but I didn't get angry about it. It was just then you'd go see something else. But there wasn't this, I mean, I wasn't as invested. I don't think I'm as invested now, really. But the thing is, nowadays, I do feel that what the movies are lacking now is relevance to the world around us. I feel like streaming shows are maybe attacking social issues and they're doing it in an effective manner. But as Quentin Tarantino put it, if you haven't watched Roger Avery and Quentin Tarantino on Joe Rogan, I highly recommend watching the whole thing. It's really interesting. But you might have seen Tarantino talks about the difference between streaming shows and movies and why he loves movies. It's the format of a film. We're so used to that format where between 90 minutes and maybe 2.5 hours or now even longer, you're being taken on an adventure or an experience that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the best of those experiences really leave you with something. You're pondering what you saw. You're quoting the dialogue. It's living in your head. Now, I know I'm a great consumer of media. I have a very hard time remembering what streaming show I watched a year ago. The Diplomat Season 2 comes out. I know I liked The Diplomat Season 1. I would be hard-pressed to tell you what happened. You know, last time I need those. I would never used to need those things, but now I do. Because you watch these streaming shows, and because you're jumping from episode to episode to episode, all you're doing is you want to see the resolution of the story. So as you're moving through the story, you don't even have time for it to sink into your intellect. It's just a different mode. And that's why I think Tarantino made a great point about that, is streaming shows are in one ear and out the other. Now, there are moments, certainly, things like The Red Wedding and Game of Thrones, but that was more of, if you think about it, like, oh my God, it was a twist, you know? And the story, Game of Thrones now, because it didn't really stick the landing, you know, you might remember certain things, but as an experience, do you ever reflect back on Game of Thrones in your own mind? And do you ever think about what a character did in a movie? You know, I think about things characters did in movies 30 years ago that have stuck with me. But I would be hard-pressed to tell you about any of the dozens of streaming shows I've watched in the last 20 years. So, now there's another article that I wanted to read, and it's from Variety, and it is a box office studio report. And this was published on December 19th. It was written by Rebecca Rubin and Brent Lang, and it was in Variety. Box office studio report card. Disney's billion-dollar rebound, Apple and Lionsgate flop hard, and more. When it came to the movies that popped in the multiplexes, 2024 was all about the sequels. Whether audiences were returning for more Deadpool, Gru, or Godzilla, recognizable properties were the big attraction at cinemas. Sequels such as Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, Despicable Me 4, and Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire accounted for 9 of the top 10 slots in terms of the year's highest-grossing worldwide releases. And Wicked, the only non-franchise film to crack that elite group, couldn't have been more familiar. The musical serves as an unofficial prequel to The Wizard of Oz and was adapted from a massively popular Broadway show that's been consistently drawing crowds for 2 decades. This year's reliance on follow-ups, spin-offs, and offshoots stands in stark contrast to 2023, when the 3 biggest blockbusters, Barbie, the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and Oppenheimer, all arrived without a Roman numeral in the title. What played out was often an IP arms race between 3 major studios, Disney, Universal, and Warner Brothers, responsible for nearly all of 2024's top-earning tentpoles. While those companies were awarded our highest marks for their performance, the overall movie theater industry doesn't have as much cause for celebration. Ticket sales are 4.8% behind 2023, which doesn't seem that bad until you consider at least a quarter of that year was hurt by the actors and writers' strikes, and 23% behind 2019, according to ComScore. Clearly, the theatrical business has yet to fully rebound from COVID and last year's work stoppage. As for cinema operators, there weren't enough new movies to hawk on their marquees. Those streamers did help fill in the gap. Hollywood newcomers like Apple and Amazon started to release more movies in theaters as a way to bring attention to their streaming services. Though it provided a few more titles for theaters to book, these tech giants have yet to demonstrate they can consistently produce movies that people will pay to watch on the big screen. Well, they're not promoting them as big screen movies. They're still promoting them as their own streaming films. They're just sticking them in theaters. And for a movie to succeed, people have to know it's out there. And if people know that it's an Apple movie and it's a Glass Onion sequel that was a Knives Out sequel that's going to be in a theater for 2 weeks before it winds up on streaming, or 33 days in the case of Gladiator II, why would you want to go to the movies at all? Why? And the thing that the movies aren't doing is providing that experience that's going to resonate with you, that's going to change you. I mean, I'm not saying that you're going to have a life lesson that's going to, make you become a monk or something, but movies used to resonate beyond just, show me something and in one ear and out the other. They lingered because they told stories that weren't just about spectacle. They were telling all kinds of stories that were designed to resonate with the human experience. And that's what viewers were getting. Something that helped them understand the world they lived in more. Does Wicked help you do that? Maybe on a mythical level. But we already understand the lesson that Wicked is going to teach us. Because we already know what the story is. And none of us are going to live in the land of Oz. So I don't know if that movie is going to have as much to say to you as, say, my beloved The Verdict. Before 2024 comes to a close, Variety assessed how the major studios fared at the global box office over the last 12 months. And it goes on to say that the highs at Disney were Inside Out at $1.69 billion, Deadpool and Wolverine at $1.33 billion, Moana 2 at $717 million to date, and the lows were The First Omen that made $53 million, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes at $397 million. Well, how are these lows? I mean, maybe The First Omen didn't make $1 billion, but it didn't cost a lot of money. We saw a new female director emerge, and she fucking knocked that shit out of the park. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was made for $30 million less than the previous Planet of the Apes movie. And I think for something that's essentially a soft reboot of a franchise, making $397 million on what they spent on it was pretty damn good. They spent a lot less money on that movie than they spent on Gladiator II, and it's within $10 million of Gladiator II's take right now. Not so bad. And the takeaways in the industry here, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, the faster they rise again. After a rare, terrible year in 2023, Disney enjoyed a considerable box office rebound with not just one, but 3 expected billion-dollar blockbusters. Moana 2 is projected to cross the $1 billion mark in January. No other studios fielded a single $1 billion release in 2024. Inside Out 2 restored Pixar's box office rut. Deadpool and Wolverine proved the squeaky clean House of Mouse can pull off an R rating. if they pull in every spandex comic book star around, and Moana 2 solidified the Polynesian set animated adventure as a major new franchise, which is good news for the live-action reboot starring Dwayne Johnson as the tattooed demigod Maui. Well, here's the thing about that. Those 3 movies were all known quantities. I mean, you know, the people that like the first one dutifully will go and see the other one. But the problem with that is, and what I would say that the problem with our sequel culture is, how is something that you already know what you're going to get resonate with you? And of course, even in Variety, the industry trade paper of note, they're saying that the highs were the movies that we already knew what we were getting. I mean, literally, Deadpool and Wolverine, while I wasn't particularly, I didn't think the movie actually told a very engaging story. And I like seeing Hugh Jackman, and I really like the Ryan Reynolds character, but I thought the first Deadpool film was really terrific. It was made for $65 million. It made $750 million at the global box office. Why? Because we'd never seen anything like Deadpool before. I mean, we'd seen it on the pages of the comic book, but Ryan Reynolds and Tim Miller delivered the goods for $65 million. And it made a ton of money. And people got to see something, even in the superhero genre, they'd never seen before. These 3 movies, sure, they made a lot of money. And, you know, we will walk zombified and walk into films that are sequels and prequels and whatever, already knowing what we're going to get. The studios feel good about making them because they don't have to take a risk, and no one has to be responsible for them. It's like, hey, it was a no-brainer. But what does it mean? What does it mean for us? Why isn't Disney going back and finding, hey, Deadpool, before it was a franchise, they had to take a chance on it. They had to take a chance on Ryan Reynolds resurrecting a character he'd already played in the first Wolverine movie when they fucked up Daredevil, bring it back, and make it for essentially a budget at Fox, and it became a huge hit. It was a risk. Well, why isn't Disney doing that now? Why aren't we getting a new IP for $65 million with Tim Miller, essentially a new director, and Ryan Reynolds, a star who had a reason for getting this character off the ground, rebooting it, redeeming it, a character he wanted to play that would showcase his talents? Why aren't we getting that from the studio? And you know what? If they made $750 million on a $65 million spend, that would be terrific. That would be terrific. And yet, where is Disney with that? Steve Asbell, the Quiet King of franchises, is making the first Omen and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes over at 20th Century Studios because that's all that Disney would allow him to make. Now he's got some original movies coming out from people like talented Ben David Grabinski. He's got a new movie with a great cast coming from 20th Century Studios. So we'll see. Will that do business? I hope so. But the point is, you can't have an emotional or an experiential experience with something you already know about than you can with something that's new. I mean, look, I admit, I love Infinity War and Endgame, but that was a culmination of, 23 movies. I knew what I was getting. I didn't expect my life to be changed. What happened to the characters could have been surprising, but did I look at my life any differently because of those movies? No. I walked out with a big smile on my face, sure. But while entertaining, did it go to my soul? And that's what built movies initially, is that people were captivated and they experienced something new about their lives. And who knows, because no one did a psychological study on movies and what they meant, and did they change? By seeing a film, could your life have been changed? My life was sort of changed when I saw all that jazz. I became very aware of the art of editorial, and I was making my little Super 8 movies. And I'm sure there have been movies in people's lives that really resonated with them, but those aren't really being made anymore. And now, look, movies are a business. Movies are a widget. So sure, if they're making money, that's fine. But what does it mean for culture? I would say that movies, they used to be a place where you would go to be illuminated about life. But now, movies, especially at the studio level, are a place to go to be, it's status quo. It's like the rest of our culture. It's stagnant. It's familiar. It's not challenging. Now, sure, Wall Street loves it when a movie makes money. But what is it doing to us as a people, psychologically, when an art form that used to be a great collision of art and commerce, what happens when the art's gone? What happens when a movie is not questioning, it's not enlightening, illuminating, it's not doing anything for its audience? Now, do I think a movie is entertainment enough? Perhaps it is. But that's not what movies used to do. That's not what the studios were doing either. And like that article said, it used to be that movies were setting trends, not towing the line. Now, they also cost a lot less money. So when you're spending $200 million on a movie, you're not interested in setting trends or illuminating anything. You're interested in seeing a return, so you're going to do what you have to do to get that back. The problem is there's no other thing on the other side. There's no mid-range or low-budget film that Disney's making that might have some breakthrough thing to say. Now that brings me to something else I wanted to talk about. One of the problems, I think one of the best movies of this year is Anora, Sean Baker's Anora. Fantastic film. That movie does for you, it answers interesting sociological questions. It has familial questions. It is sexy. It is funny. It is heartwarming. It is also edgy as hell. And most of all, wildly entertaining. Easily one of the best movies of the year. Have you heard of it? Do you know anyone who's seen it? Here's a movie that would absolutely, if people went en masse, would go to the theater and have a terrific time. But because of the kind of movie it is, it's never going to make $1 billion. So a movie like Anora, Festival Darling, gets picked up by a mini major. They put it in a theater, and it basically dies a slow and painful death because they don't have the money to market a movie like that, and they don't know how to make people understand that Anora is the kind of movie that once they see it, they're going to talk about it to their friends. They're going to have an experience. Movie theaters, when I walked out of movie theaters as a kid, it didn't matter what I watched. I had an experience that left me moved or elated in some way. I'd go see Arthur, Dudley Moore's Arthur. It was a comedy, a comedy about a rich guy that I would never be. But I love that movie, and you get to see the relationship between Arthur Bach and Liza Minnelli's character and John Gielgud. And even though it was a comedy that fucking delivered. It wasn't just funny. It also resonated and had meaning. And you watch the movie in the beginning, it's just about a drunk guy. But by the time you get to the end of the movie, it had real resonance. Arthur's relationship with his butler, played by John Gielgud, was moving. So in one comedic film, you could have a whole wide range of emotions. And nowadays, a movie like Anora, I'm not saying it's a lot like Arthur, but there's a lot going on in this film. And that movie provides the experience within a movie theater that would be a crowd pleaser. That film should have been doing bang up business, but nobody knows it's there. And in a way, nobody is really interested in making people know it's there, which I find to be a kind of a crime. Anora is the kind of movie, look, how do you get anybody to go see an independent movie these days? And if no one's going to see them theatrically, and when you throw a movie like Anora up, because it didn't have a great theatrical run, it didn't have word of mouth, people will discover it on streaming, but essentially it will be washed away. It'll be forgotten because analytics will not support it. In the long run, how is the cinematic art form going to survive when the only things left to watch are giant sequels, prequels, tentpole properties that people have been programmed over the years to watch because Hollywood isn't making anything new? And eventually, where is that going to leave movies if all you're seeing is regurgitated stuff? Eventually, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, movies will have nothing. They will have absolutely no resonance because everyone will have seen everything that's getting made. And no one's doing anything to get an audience to go out and see Anora in a theater where you could have an experience with an audience watching a film. And it's it's mind-boggling to me that the studios aren't doing both. Because look, any startup knows you have to start small and build. You have to have creative people and encourage them. Yeah, you have to find investment. But we're not doing that. We're not investing in the next generation of filmmakers. We're not investing in, I mean, we've got, look, I'm excited. I haven't seen Nosferatu yet. I'm excited to see Robert Eggers because he has a unique and original voice. And I love The Witch, I love The Lighthouse, I love The Northman, and now I hope to love Nosferatu. He's somebody that when I see a Robert Eggers movie, like, look, did I love The Lighthouse? I didn't love it, but I certainly was transported by it. And I thought about it a lot afterwards. What did it mean? And it affected me. You know, I felt like I'd had an experiential event in my life that made sense. It resonated. But worse than that, the theater owners themselves, those theater owners that are in rural America or in places around the world, independent theater owners, if they're not getting movies beyond the tentpole pictures, if they're not being able to have a movie that people know to come to, I mean, Anora, no one knew about it. No one, still now, very few people know about it. You know, people that are I guess, posting on Letterboxd might, and it's a shame because it's one of the best movies of the year. It's one of the most entertaining films of the year. And yet, ironically, it would provide a movie theater experience that people crave when they go to the theaters that they wouldn't know what to expect. You know, it is a satisfying experience at the movies. And it's the thing that movie theaters were built for, and it's the thing that movies themselves are supposed to deliver. And it's unique. I can't remember seeing a movie. I mean, I think Sean Baker is a great filmmaker. And I want to see more of those things. But if Sean Baker's movies aren't making money, I mean, sure, he'll get recognition at award season. But, I mean, I want him to be able to keep making movies because he's a voice that we need. And if the studios aren't making sure that their movie theaters are full of things that have been precisely or well marketed, how is a movie like Anora going to get even into a theater? How can a booker put a movie like Anora in the theater in good conscience when you've got, I mean, you have Sonic showing, you've got Moana 2, Wicked, those are making money. Okay, those are fine, but those are all the safe. Where does Anora fit in? How can it fit in? How can we make it fit in? And more importantly, why aren't the studios making sure that a movie like Anora is known by audiences? Because who's going to make their movies in 10 or 15 or 20 years? Or hell, even 5 years from now? Where are the new filmmakers? Well, Sean Baker is one of the people that you are going to want to see more from. And if they don't get a chance to make something theatrically work, what happens? When does Sean Baker say, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm making all these great movies. I go to Cannes and people give me standing ovations, or I go to Toronto, and then when I have my art finally go where it's supposed to be, which is a movie theater, there's nobody showing up. And what does that say about us as a culture? I mean, look, art's important. That's how we define ourselves. And now, has Hollywood made it so all they can make are $150 million movies, and hopefully they'll make $1 billion? And even then, when you walk out of Moana 2, hey, maybe your kids loved it, but what has that really done for you? Has it changed your life at all? Did you want it to change your life? Maybe it doesn't even matter. I don't know. It matters to me because I love movies. But, you know, I wonder, maybe it's an art form whose time is come and gone. I have another article I want to read. This one's really long, but I won't read the whole thing, but I did want to touch on it because I think it was really interesting. This is more of a study. This comes to us from the National Library of Medicine, the National Center for Biotechnology Information. And this was published in May of 2020, May 2nd, 2020. The impact of films. Changes in young people's attitudes after watching a movie. Nowadays, films occupy a significant portion of the media products consumed by people. In Russia, cinema is being considered as a means of individual and social transformation, which makes a contribution to the formation of the Russian audience's outlook, including their attitudes towards topical social issues. At the same time, the question of the effectiveness of film's impact remains an open question in psychological science. According to the empirical orientation of our approach to the study of mass media influence, our goal was to obtain new data on the positive impact of films based on specific experimental research. The task was to identify changes in the attitudes of young people as the most active viewers towards topical social issues after watching a specifically selected film. Using a psychosemantic technique that included 25 scales designed to identify attitudes towards elderly people, respondents evaluated their various characteristics before and after watching the film. Using a number of characteristics related to the motivational, emotional, and cognitive spheres, significant changes were revealed. At the same time, significant differences were found in assessments of the elderly between undergraduate students and postgraduate students. After watching the film, postgraduate students' attitudes toward elderly people changed in a positive way, while undergraduate students' negative assessments only worsened. The revealed opposite trends can be explained by individual differences of respondents, which include age, educational status as an indicator of individual psychological characteristics, the experience of interaction with elderly people, and, as a result, attitudes toward elderly people at a time before watching the movie. The finding that previous attitudes mediate the impact of the film complements the ideas of the contribution of individual differences to media effects. Most of the changes detected immediately after watching a movie did not remain over time. A single movie viewing did not have a lasting effect on viewers' attitudes, and it suggests the further task of identifying mechanisms of the sustainability of changes. Introduction. With the development of information technology, a person's immersion in the field of mass media is steadily increasing. A significant portion of consumed media products is occupied by cinema. According to sociological surveys, going to the cinema is the most popular way of spending leisure time in Russia today. The audiences of cinema are growing, the core of which are 18 to 24-year-olds, as well as the frequency of visits. Every 10th Russian goes to the cinema several times a month. And the opportunities and frequency of internet viewings is expanding, while interest in TV shows is also increasing. The importance of the role that cinema plays in Russia is also confirmed by the close attention currently being paid to the development of the cinema industry. The priority topics of state financing are defined as, example, law and order, the heroes of modern society in the fight against crime, terror, extremism, and corruption, on the continuity of military generations, on the successors of military traditions, images, patterns of behavior, and creative motivation of our contemporary, a man of labor in the military or a scientist, which state programs are being launched to open new cinema theaters in small towns. Cinema becomes a tool for broadcasting state ideology to the masses, and is also being considered as a means of individual and social transformation. As a result, films are expected to form beliefs, influence opinions, and change attitudes, including towards topical social issues. This is in Russia. It's also, by the way, in China. Now, this is in 2020. So you have communist regimes understanding the power of what cinema can do. We get Gladiator II, Moana, and Wicked. I mean, I'm just saying. We're not getting a soldier story anymore. We're not getting Gandhi for 3 hours anymore. We're not getting And Justice for All. We're not getting The Verdict. We're not getting Lawrence of Arabia anymore. In America, the movies that the studios are making, as much as I love studio filmmaking, they're relatively inconsequential when holding a mirror up to the experience of being a human being. Everything we know is very superficial. Classic storytelling is classic storytelling. When you get Moana 2, as opposed to Moana 1, you're getting something as a sequel that's once removed from being even relevant. It can, by definition, only be relevant to the first movie, which means what are you going to do? you're going to figure out a way to repeat the first movie in a new and unique way. So is anyone going to learn anything at all? I don't know. Now, I'll just jump down here. When referring to the research of cinema, we can find data on the diverse effects of film exposure. It should be noted that the effectiveness of the impact is determined by what it is directed at. It is more difficult to change human behavior than to influence opinions or attitudes. In this regard, there is still a debatable problem on the influence of the media on the aggressive behavior of people. This research focuses on the potential of pro-social, humanistic impact of films and their effectiveness in solving topical social issues. The studies reveal the influence of films on people's beliefs and opinions, stereotypes, and attitudes. Movies can have a significant impact on gender and ethnic stereotypes, change attitudes towards certain groups of people, and cause newly formed opinions on various issues. For example, HIV films, including, dare I say it, Philadelphia, that I've been talking about a lot lately, contributed to sympathy to people living with HIV. Of course, now here in America, we live in a world where if Tom Hanks were to play that lawyer and Denzel Washington was going to defend him, people would scream, "You can't have Tom Hanks be in that movie because he's not a gay man dying of AIDS." And then the movie would never get made, and the positive impact on society that movie engendered would never happen because, people don't understand the role of an actor anymore. They would have performative outrage, whatever. And that is sad. And that is problematic. And that's one of the things wrong with our American civilization. I would dare say we have been engineered, or we haven't, but younger people, ever since the rise of cell phones, they are carrying around a brainwashing. They're carrying around their Black Mirror. And when I say brainwashing, not like, say, Lawrence Harvey was in The Manchurian Candidate, but there's a lot of evidence to support that there are powerful forces. I mean, Yuri Bezmetov, how do you take down a country in 20 years? Look that interview up. TV series with transgender characters contributed to positive attitudes towards transgender persons. The portrayal of mental disorders in movies had an effect on people's knowledge about and attitudes toward the mentally ill. Also, viewing an empathy-arousing film about immigrants induced more positive attitudes toward them. I mean, that great, those two, The Immigrants and the New Land, that Swedish, the double feature that was made in the early 70s. I saw that in school, and those are great. And watching a movie offering positive depiction of gay men reduced homophobia. Other films influenced people's attitudes towards smoking and their intentions to quit, while a series with a positive donation message helped viewers to make decisions about their own donation. It has been shown that emotional involvement in viewing, evaluated using surveys drawing on theories of social learning and social representation, increases the effectiveness of influence. Immersion in narrative that correlates with the need for cognition is characterized by a shift of focus from the real world to the depicted one, explains the power of impact within the framework of transportation theory. Cinema can change people's opinions on specific issues without affecting more stable constructs. For example, the film JFK, dedicated to the Kennedy assassination, influenced judgments about the causes of this crime, but generally did not change the political beliefs of the audience. At the same time, the movies Argo and Zero Dark 30 changed viewers' opinions about the U.S. government that reflected in an improvement in sentiments about the government and its institutions. Movies create images of other countries that stimulate interest in them. For example, European films shaped young viewers' ideas about other European countries, and such results were obtained in a study of the role of films and series in the daily life of young Germans through interviews and focus groups. Another study showed that whether the movies were violent, scary, or happy, the more the viewers were immersed in the stories, the more favorable impressions they had of the places featured in them. Various positive effects of films on children and adolescents were revealed. Dramatic films taught teenagers about social interaction with the opposite sex and adults, had a positive impact on their self-concept, and as shown by experiments, increased ethnic tolerance. Humanistically oriented movies improve skills of children in communicating with peers, increase their desire to help and understand others. One of the prime examples of positive impact is cli-fi movies, which clearly show what we can expect in the near future and offers ways to think about what can be done to avoid the darkest predictions. Cli as in climate. Thus, after watching the film The Day After Tomorrow, viewers recognize their responsibility for the Earth's ecology and the need to change consumer attitudes toward nature. Now remember, this is a Roland Emmerich disaster film, but it was steeped in the idea of climate change. Hey, it might not be happening that quickly, but it gets you to think about those things. It gets you to think about something other than yourself. And user-generated content is not really doing that. Viewers recognize their responsibility for the Earth's ecology and the need to change consumer attitudes toward nature. In general, the screening of films on climate issues increases the number of online requests and media discussions on these issues. It should be noted that when analyzing the impact of films, conclusions about their effectiveness are the result of different methodological approaches, which have varying advantages and limitations. Content analysis reveals the images, attitudes, stereotypes broadcast by films or images of scientists and current scientific ideas on large data sets. However, questions remain about the effectiveness, strength, and sustainability of the impact on the audience. The influence of films can be investigated through a survey of viewers, and based on this, conclusions are drawn about the links between a person's attitude and his or her viewer experience, such as in the study of gender attitudes and their correlations with teen movie viewing habits. Let me just zip down. So it goes on, and then it talks about participants in the film, and anyway, I just wanted to cover that a little bit because when I was growing up, that was exactly what was happening. I was seeing all different kinds of films, and while I've always said the best fiction is the most truthful, and even though you're watching a fictionalized version of a story, great stories well told will definitely affect you. Nowadays, when was the last time you saw a movie that resonated with you, that you learned something from, that moved you? I mean, obviously romantic movies, and The Notebook doesn't count, you know. But I remember, even though it's based on a Stephen King story, The Shawshank Redemption continues to resonate with people because at the end of the day, it's about two men developing a truly deep, deep friendship that transcends the horrors of the prison that they're in, and it allows them to have something that will resonate with them and probably until the rest of their lives. That's why people love that movie. Casablanca, you know, a film that unrequited love, and yet a man is willing to give up his own feelings for the woman he loves to do the right thing. You know, the great movies have stuff to teach us. The problem is, what's going to happen? Look, nowadays, cynicism, glibness, snarky humor, everything that pushes people apart. Authenticity. You know, I think one of the interesting things, I didn't know so many people, like I said, disliked dogs based on, or people just didn't know crypto as a part of the Superman mythology. There are people that are rejecting this idea of James Gunn's Superman movie because there's a super dog in it wearing a cape. And I'm like, well, you know, to me, that just puts a smile on my face as a long-time Superman fan. But then it begs the question, what do people want out of a Superman movie? I mean, I'm curious. Like, okay, you want hope, but this is what as much as I enjoy, and I said I like the Wagnerian operatic nature of Zack Snyder's Superman, those movies are they're the height of nihilism. What in those movies? I mean, okay, so Superman will defeat evil. He looks cool doing it. But where's the joy? What has Superman built? Okay, he saves the world from Darkseid. But what I mean, I can't think of a more, those movies are incredibly mean-spirited. I was talking about it, Holly Hunter gets a grandma's peach. It's piss. My God, in a comic book movie, as much as, that's just gross, the nightmare vision of the future that they're trying to prevent and all that. Even in Michael Keaton's Batman, there's still a lot of joyful interplay between Kim Basinger and Michael Keaton. And the Joker, even though he's a homicidal maniac, he's playing Party Man by Prince and throwing paint on the walls of a museum. There's still scenes in it that'll put a smile on your face, even though it's taking place in Anton Furst's crazy Gotham City. But in a Superman movie, by definition, the character itself was created by children of immigrants that was supposed to be fighting for the downtrodden. And it's wild to me that we have people, again, I understand the vision of what Zack Snyder was able to do, but that vision, does that warm your heart? Does that make you feel something deep inside of you? What does it say? And I keep seeing, there's a lot of people that talk about the Snyder Cut, but I wonder, okay, did this help you to become a more self-actualized human being? When you watch, if you grew up watching the Richard Donner Superman, everybody still remembers that movie. They remember everything about it. They remember everything that happens with Superman. They remember everything that happens with Lex Luthor and Margot Kidder. And it puts a smile on people's face. Hell, Rex Reed makes a cameo in that movie. Nobody knows who he is anymore. And it's wild to me that movies that really shaped who I was, because there was such a diverse group of things that we were experiencing when I was growing up, is almost completely removed from studio movies. Studio movies are designed, they're more akin to a great roller coaster. Look, I love a great roller coaster. And seldom, like a lot of movies today, seldom are there roller coasters that really deliver the goods. But when you're on one that does, it's great. But it's just a roller coaster. And when you step off it, it's like, okay, let's go eat. And I feel that movies now, and in a way, I would say our culture is diminished, literally diminished. That movies were an outlet where people went that did shape culture. They did matter. People thought about them. They were water cooler movies. When Decent Proposal came out, for weeks people talked about, would you let your significant other sleep with somebody for $1 million? And of course, for men, you have a hot wife like Demi Moore, and she looked great in that movie, and you've got a handsome man like Robert Redford, who's older and richer than you. But the question is, it's like, was his cock bigger? Did he get Demi more off? Was he a more skilled lover? Was he doing things to her that I can't do? And he's rich. So, when you're thinking about these things, you have to confront what's actually going on in anybody that's been in a relationship. Any man watched that movie and is like, well, shit, man. On the one hand, we had to grapple with the fact, like, let's take the $1 million. But on the other hand, it's like, am I inadequate? And that suddenly, that was, people talked about it. That was what that movie, why it was resonant, and the discussion. And the thing is, that discussion was a valuable one, because in having that conversation, you have to confront your own fears. If you're honest with yourself, what is it, in a relationship that matters? Can you overcome your jealousy? As a guy, what was that man doing to your wife that you couldn't do? And was your wife going to come back to you and think, you're never going to be able to go down on me the way that guy did. You will never make me come as hard as he did. And how do you fight that? If you're a dude, that's a rough one. That's why that movie resonated. And there are other movies. Fatal Attraction, again, resonated. It resonates with people. The Notebook. It's a romantic film. When Harry Met Sally was a beautifully enjoyable, faux Woody Allen movie, but it's great in its own right, about the relationship that people have and over the course of time. And what that movie did, yeah, it's a comedy, but it makes you think about the relationships you have with other people in your own life. Field of Dreams. Talking about that a lot lately. That movie, if you're a guy and you watch Field of Dreams, that ending is a killer. It sneaks up on you. When was the last time you had that experience in a movie theater? I don't know if anyone can provide that. Certainly not in a corporately run environment. They can't do that. They don't even know how. That's what you need filmmakers for. Are we going to have any in the next 5 or 10 years that even know how to do that? I don't know. Does it even matter? Maybe we're entering a new world where user-generated content and virtual reality, we can program whatever it is. If it's left up to human beings and you can program your own experience, which is what we're doing now, how are you ever going to stumble across things that open up your eyes to different ways of living? If you're only ever being given the familiar, if you're only ever experiencing things that you already know you're going to like, how is, as Duke Leto would have told you in David Lynch's Dune, how is the sleeper supposed to awaken? How are you ever supposed to see the world in a different way? Movies were very good at doing that for people. And we don't have that anymore. I don't know. I don't even know what this show's about. I'm so off in the weeds. But anyway, really, I just want to know what you think. And you know what? Let's find out if anybody thinks, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that do, because I've been rambling for a long effing time. So let's see what you guys think. You know, and some people, by the way, can I just say, I was talking to my friend tonight, and one of my favorite movies when I was growing up was Alan Parker's Fame. Came out in 1980, and it was about it was formerly the New York School of Performing Arts. It's a high school, and it follows a class, an incoming class, through their 4 years in school. And talk about representation. This movie was made in 1980 about high school kids. Multi-ethnic, black, white, straight, gay, rich, poor. Incredible film. The movie is incredible. I love this movie so much. But there's a moment in the movie where they go to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And the guy, there's an MC. And if you've ever gone to see the Rocky, do people still go to midnight? But it was a big deal for a long time. Maybe it still is. But there's what's called a shadow cast. People dress up and they go and they perform the movie right underneath the screen. And a lot of people go every Friday and Saturday night. But this guy, I think his name was Sal. And when he passed away, he'd been doing this for 40 years in real life. But he's in the movie. And in the film, he's doing the whole preamble, and there's people that are coming to see the movie that have never seen Rocky Horror before, and they don't understand that the shadow cast and this introduction and him calling out the different regulars is part of the show. And somebody screams from the back, "Start the show already!" And the MC's like, "This is the show!" Because somebody knew they just want what they want. And it's like when I did my show about what did I think of the Superman trailer last night. I said at 46 minutes in, I said, hey, now you're going to get what you've come for, and here's my opinion. Well, many people, whenever I do that, I get comments like, who is this guy? And why is he talking? Why is he rambling? And why is he at 46 minutes? And I'm like, that is the show. It's Robservations. It's not, let me give you what I think in 5 minutes. I could do that, but that's not what this show's about. I think maybe I should retitle this show instead of Robservations, just the Rambling Rob, maybe, or something. But Robservations is kind of catchy, and I did not know. I'd forgotten Rob Liefeld had that title in Wizard magazine. Maybe I wouldn't have used it. But let's go and see what people are saying. Oh my God, there's a lot of people. Wow, there's a lot of big super chats. Wow, you guys, you're nice. Jim O says, Rob, was that your voice in Superman Returns playing a reporter near the beginning? I had the movie on in the background, and I swear it was your voice. Anyway, thanks for all your insights. Yes, it was. That is me. My character has a name, Ross Campbell, and I was the NASA reporter. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. So Brian tells me I'm going to play this part in the movie. He's going to give me a part. Now, I've been watching everybody filming them for months. The whole crew knows me. And now I have to I get wardrobe, costume fitting, and I have to get up, and I'm being shot against a green screen, and the entire crew of this $200 million movie, I'm now the actor. I've never acted in a big budget feature film before, and there I was, the entire crew looking at me. I'm not going to say that I wasn't intimidated, because I was, and I did it. You can see me in the movie if you actually pause it. You can see I'm right there on the screen. I'm only on the screen for like not even a full second, but you hear my voice reporting on what's going down with this shuttle. So yeah, that was me. I'm in the credits. I think I'm credited as NASA reporter, but the effects guys like Mark Stetson and his crew gave me the name Ross Campbell, which they had to clear. So by the way, just so you know, when I was in like Star Wars XXX, my porn name became Ross Campbell. Now, I didn't do any porn scenes. I wish I had a porn cock. I don't. I can wield it well, but I just don't have the, I don't have the broadsword, if you know what I'm saying. But Ross Campbell is my porn name. I'm a cunning linguist. So watch the movie. Thank you for that. Carlos Lima has been a member for 11 months. Thanks, Carlos. Hemorrhoid hurts instead of hemorrhoid. That's very funny. I loved a great courtroom drama. Now I believe Colonel Jessup was right. That's what modern culture has done. Laugh out loud. And Star Trek Picard killed Star Trek The Next Generation for me. What about season 3? Wasn't that a little better? Major Chai Chai says, over Christmas break, I'm going to complete the 3 Colors Trilogy Challenge. Everybody should. It's not really a challenge. You're going to love it. You're going to have a really good time. It'll be much easier going than Antonioni's movies. Marcos says, people crying at the Superman teaser. What the fuck's up with that? Well, you're crying out of a joy. I think it connects. There's certain images. It's like when you read the comic A Superman for All Seasons, which is clearly a huge influence on what James Gunn was doing. If you read A Superman for All Seasons, it's a very lyrical, mythological, they're very simple Superman stories, but they really work really, really well. And it kind of worked that way. I think it really digs into the whole mythological memory of what Superman has been across generations for some people. So Major Chai Chai says, I also recently watched Bicycle Thieves. Oh man, and that's a killer. How about that ending? A simple story that can be as emotionally crushing as anything. Tomahawk Edition sends in, that's $30 Australian? I think, thank you so much. One of two. It's not just the movies themselves or the way in which they are released. I haven't walked out of a movie in 40 years. I have twice this year due to the presentation. When a movie that is filmed in scope is projected on, oh my God, you're continuing this with 70. Wow, you're a very generous person. This is a really important message. Tomahawk Edition is saying, I've twice this year due to the presentation. When a movie that is filmed in scope is projected on a 185 screen web, there used to be a mat that would come down to reframe the screen. Now it just looks like a washed out LCD screen with gray bars on the top and bottom. If it looks like a cheap television, I may as well just watch my expensive TV. Tomahawk Edition is absolutely correct. One of the big things that is killing movies is the presentation. My friend who is a booker made a really important point to me tonight. And he said that a movie like Anora, even when it goes to an AMC, and look, AMC spent a lot of money upgrading their projection. They've teamed up with Dolby. They have the IMAX screens that are usually pretty good. The presentation at AMC screens is great. But if you can get a movie like Anora in it, they'll put it in the smallest screen possible. So an indie movie gets an indie presentation. So if you put Anora in a big, giant Dolby cinema, even though that movie does not have visual effects, the human spectacle of it, I have a theory about this. Look, the bigger the screen, even if you're just looking at a movie about people, the more psychologically effective it is. Movies used to be in these grand palaces. Movies were treated, obviously the financial issues came into play, but when I was a kid, all the big movie theaters, all my favorite movie theaters in Seattle were single screen giant theaters. And even if you were seeing a movie that was just people talking, seeing the human face 40 feet high, brilliantly projected with the proper luminance in the bulb, and you've got the sound track, thunderous soundtrack. Even if people are just speaking, hearing their voices, your mind, there's something psychological that's happening. You can't take your eyes off the screen. And a movie like Anora, even though it compared to like a $200 million movie like Wicked or whatever, Anora is going to be very well served if you have it on a beautiful screen with big presentation. I saw Arthur 4 times in Seattle's Cinerama Theater in 81, and in 82 they put a special sound system in there when Blade Runner opened. So I saw this great comedy. I saw Tootsie there too, and I saw these great comedies that I dearly love. Arthur and Tootsie are 2 of my favorite comedies. Tootsie's one of my favorite movies, but I saw it on a gigantic screen, and seeing a movie large has an effect, and I think that's part of it. I mean, you know, obviously movies don't play as long as they used to play, but I mean, Tomahawk Edition, you're absolutely right. If the presentation isn't great, you're not going to like the movie. It doesn't overwhelm you. And that's because everyone's trying to cut corners. You know, I think that's a problem with our culture in general. I believe in capitalism. The free market is great. The problem is everybody's trying to subvert the free market and get a little bit more because everyone's greedy. Look, at the end of the day, I would rather go to a movie theater, you know, like the Alamo Drafthouse. They have the right idea. They're trying to present when their job is to give you the greatest experience possible. IMAX feels that way. And I think AMC, you know, when they're upgrading their theaters, they do. But there's nothing worse than seeing something that you can get at your home. And a lot of people have really incredible home theaters now. So, and by the way, Tomahawk Edition, you were very generous. That was very nice of you. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And thanks for the great question. And this was, I believe, your first super chat on this channel, or 2 super chats. Welcome. Welcome to this Rob's Ramblings. I haven't even had any liquor tonight, man. I don't have any liquor. Just water. Coach sipping Jamba Juice. Is it Jamba? Yeah. Terrifier 3 proved what I've been saying all along. Movies, a part of franchises, don't need a huge marketing budget. The ones that need huge marketing budgets are the new original films that nobody's ever heard of. Amen. But the problem is, nobody wants to take that risk. A movie like Anora, I mean, obviously, they only have certain means to be able... If you're coming out from like an it's great what A24 has done. I love A24 because they've turned themselves into a brand, which I think is great. Blumhouse, to a certain extent, has done that, but more people know about A24, especially college students. It's wild. But yeah, you're absolutely right. A movie like Anora should have been given... They should have taken a shot and got a great big marketing budget for that, because I think Anora was the kind of movie that had the opportunity, especially with young people. That's the kind of movie, Anora, I'm not going to compare it to The Graduate or something like that, but it could have that kind of resonance. Young people, the people that love Euphoria, whatever, you know, people that are, we live in such a weird time now, but I think that movie, you know, being marketed to the indie art house crowd was wrong. I think I would have marketed that movie to college age students and said, come have a really, enough of the political correctness, watch some people that enjoy fucking fall in love and want to get married. And of course, one of the guys, the son of a Russian oligarch who doesn't want to be married to a sex worker. I mean, basically the movie's about an OnlyFans model / prostitute / you know, who still falls in love with a guy. I think it's inherently optimistic. And it's just great. It's an entertaining time. But you're right. Somebody spends a lot of money on that movie. You market it correctly. Forget analytics. You got to have a great marketing team that knows using social media. Show some of those clips. Pose the question, if you met a girl like this, would you get married to her? I mean, you know, you watch Fresh and Fit. You have all these OnlyFans models defending what they're doing. And I mean, that's part of our culture. Anora should have been a monster hit. But you know what? Nobody had the money or nobody had the talent to market that movie the way they should have. It needed that. Nick Markins, how you doing, man? Says, Rob, what are your thoughts on people claiming that LG announced they won't make Blu-ray players anymore as the death blow to physical media, when most of us already have the players? Also, boutique labels release hundreds of titles a year. Overreaction? First of all, I think it's a bit of an overreaction because LG did not have a huge market share in terms of players. It was not a big part of their business. Whereas, on the other hand, LG is making great OLED TVs, and they're continuing to push the envelope in terms of screen technology. It is a problem. It is a problem. But to me, physical media is going to descend back to where the Laserdisc market was. With the Laserdisc market, mostly there was only one manufacturer of players. At first, it was Pioneer. There were other players, you could get other players, but Pioneer was the predominant. They basically serviced the whole marketplace. And the problem is you don't have a lot of people jumping into physical media, so player sales are not like expanding. It's a contracting marketplace by definition. But someone's going to figure it out, whether it's Magnetar, even though their players are really expensive. We need a new Oppo. We need somebody that's going to service the marketplace with PlayStation. The new PlayStation and probably the new Xbox, they're not going to have physical media drives the way they do now. I think somebody will jump in, and it'll be like the Laserdisc market was back in the day. So I don't think it's the death knell of physical media. The only people that are saying that are not physical media collectors. And there's a lot of people that aren't. But we collectors, it's a vibrant community. I got a box of stuff from Radiance, and they included a booklet that was printed this month about their 2025 plans. That was really amazing. Radiance is an incredible label. The boutique labels are going to service, there's always going to be a community of people that are buying movies, whether they're young people or old people or ancient people like myself with one foot in the grave. We're going to be buying physical media, and they can pry it out of our cold, dead fingers because people like to collect stuff. And movies are things people like to collect. So I don't see them going away anytime soon, and certainly it isn't the death knell. People just like to say shit. I get it, and they couch it that way. But if you look at market share, and to be fair, we're not getting a lot of players. I mean, I think Magnetar is a $1,500 player. There are high-end players as well, and I think people are going to come down and service the marketplace. They'll figure it out. I assume that we're going to have physical media till around the time I'm probably dead, I hope, and then somebody will get my physical media collection and wonder, this guy was weird, dude. What weird tastes. I don't know if anyone's seen, there's a girl, I don't know if she's on YouTube or Instagram, where her father passed away, and her father has this massive vinyl collection, and she's been going through and pulling out albums from like the 70s and listening to them for the very first time and experiencing them. And it's great. I mean, kudos to her for doing this. I love shit like this. And she's trying to get insight into her father and putting herself in why did this thing mean something? Why did my dad feel enough connection to this thing that I've never heard to buy it? And I think what she's doing is really cool. And I love the fact, on one hand, when social media has made everybody, suffer from main character syndrome or yell and scream at each other, there's a lot of people doing the flip side and trying to understand life and trying to understand pop culture. As a matter of fact, Popcorn in Bed, she watched Star Trek 09 and put up a video today. I wish she would have rejected it more than she did, but, she didn't disappoint me. Love that girl. Where was that girl when I was growing up in high school, man? I don't know. Let's see. Is it, I got to blow this up. I don't know why I am not allowing myself. I'm trying to read a screen that's far away from me that I can't read. I still can't read it. Dave Tiggett says, can movies like Last of the Mohicans or It's a Wonderful Life be made? Answer me this. No. Last of the Mohicans would now be a 10-episode streaming series. And that's the problem. A studio would have, what a studio would ask you? Who's going to go see this movie? In back in the day, Last of the Mohicans is one of the great American classic tales that had been discovered by generation after generation after generation after generation. Kids today, they don't even fucking read. They're not even required to read a book like that in school. And that's one of the problems. No one wants, a studio executive wouldn't know what fucking Last of the Mohicans was. And that was made by Michael Mann, starring, Daniel Day-Lewis. Magua. I mean, come on. That movie fucking rules. Isn't that Madeline Stowe? I will find you. Or maybe it's not. Maybe I'm mixing that up. But Madeline Stowe, Brian Benben's wife. You go, Brian Benben. If you ever seen Tony Scott's Revenge, it's fucking brutal. But before it gets brutal, Kevin Costner was sure happy he went down south in more ways than one. Just you don't mess with Anthony Quinn's wife, dude. It ended badly, for her especially. Thomas Logan says, longtime viewer, always happy to see you, Thomas. For anyone here on the fence about Anora, it's the best love story since Chungking Express. It will make you laugh, cringe, smile, and cry. It's cinema. See, Thomas Logan and I can disagree on some certain things, but Thomas has great taste. And he's exactly right. He just defined what Anora is. It's, say it with me now, cinema. And if you get people into a cinema and they get to see Anora in the cinema, they will walk out having had a great experience. And that's all anybody wants. And they'll have an experience that they won't soon forget. Chungking Express, because Quentin Tarantino, for a while, he used some of his early money and he started a distribution company called Rolling Thunder. And he brought Chungking Express and put it in a theater, and his company was Rolling Thunder, the movie. And that's where I saw Chungking Express and I was blown away. Blown away. Became a Wong Kar-wai acolyte. And Chungking Express and its spin-off, Fallen Angels, they were supposed to be one big movie, but, Wong Kar-wai became the one movie I'm like, who is this guy and where can I see everything he's ever made? And that's cinema, man. Doyle's photography, oh my God, incredible. But Thomas Logan is correct. And that's what people don't seem to understand. It doesn't matter what a movie's about. If it truly is a cinematic experience that makes people feel, it doesn't matter whether it's a romance or an alien invasion movie or a tragedy or an erotic thriller. If people get swept up in the story, Anora delivers a story that is all of those things. And it is a shame that it's not making any money. Because when it gets booked into a theater, you have some poor booker who's trying to advocate for great independent cinema. And because a studio wants to keep Gladiator II on a fucking screen, and then, of course, Paramount doesn't want them to know that they're going to pull it right away, Anora gets the short shrift. Look, there's an erotic, Nicole Kidman's in a erotic movie called Baby Girl, where she has a torrid affair with her intern. And that movie's having a hard time getting screens with Nicole Kidman in it because of the storyline. Now, Nicole Kidman being in a movie where apparently it's very sexually explicit, nowadays, even that's no fun because you can just go to your OnlyFans account or you can go to RedTube or YouPorn or whatever and watch whatever the hell you want to watch. Eroticism, it's too bad. But seeing an actress like Nicole Kidman throw herself into an erotic role in her 50s, bring it on, my friends. I can't wait to see Baby Girl. Sledge says, great show tonight, Rob. Wonderful insights. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Kelvin Wellborn says, I really enjoyed... hang on a second. That just jumped ahead. I really enjoyed the first of 3 episodes of True Noir. Well, Kelvin, thank you very much. True Noir is available for purchase. You can get it in different forms. There is Act 1, which is episodes 1, 2, and 3 put together in one program, or you can subscribe to all 10 episodes. Now, I know it's not free, and we don't have it up on Audible, because you can't put it on Audible yet till you have it all cut together. But just so you know, totally independently produced. I'm getting up tomorrow, and I'm driving into LA, and I am doing the final mix on another episode. But I'm very, very proud. For all the mad shit I talk on the internet, I couldn't do it if I wasn't also a creator making entertainment. I think that is great entertainment that begins with a great script. Max Allan Collins adapted his own novel, True Detective. He wrote me a banger script, a script that I had to go. I realized I read the scripts. I was like, I gotta get the cast to bring this to life properly, and that's why I got people like William Sadler. William Sadler, who played Wilson Wyler Kincannon in the movie I produced, The Hills Run Red, the horror movie. He was, of course, Death in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. He was in Shawshank Redemption. He's been in millions of movies. His wife lost her 2-year battle with cancer. So shout out to Mr. Sadler. I'm very sorry to hear that. I know you guys were married for a long time and you had a great relationship, and she lives on through you. Sorry to hear that, sir. Foxy Scorpio says, Ace Hunter's fucking flying motorcycle, baby. Let me tell you about Ace Hunter's flying motorcycle. Of course, that was Barry Bostwick who played Ace Hunter, who was in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, who did the voice of Turl, the main character in one of my favorite, if not my favorite, animated film of all time, Fantastic Planet. But that actor, Barry Bostwick, Ace Hunter, is in our audio drama. He plays Franklin Delano Roosevelt in True Noir, the assassination of Anton Cermak, which is available now at truenoir.co. No M. truenoir.co. Barry Bostwick power. Retromeister says, here we go. I'm going to mispronounce this name. Kohei Harakoshi's My Hero Academia has more respect and integrity for Superman with the character of All Might than DC and James Gunn will ever do. Well, now wait a minute. Look, James Gunn is a huge comic book fan, and I would encourage everybody to wait and see the film. I think the movie is going to be special. I think that, look, it is going to be a much more fantastical look at the DC universe than we've ever seen on film before. You know, I don't want it to be Legends of Tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be, as much as I enjoyed a lot of Legends of Tomorrow. But I think he's going to deliver something good. I think James Gunn really knows what he is doing. And we'll see. Mario Lopez says, I don't need joy, I need hope in Superman movies. I think you will get it. I know you're not sold, and maybe not. Maybe it won't work. I don't know. But I think it might. I think it can. I hope it can. I mean, we'll see. Kelvin Wellborn says the three colors blue tonight is on the agenda for ages. Well, watch it. You guys are going to love Koslowski, man. I'm telling you. And you want to go back and watch the Double Life of Veronique. You're going to want to watch the Decalogue. You will. Mario Lopez says, if Man of Steel was made today, people would love it even more. You know what? I don't know, man. I still think that the end of that movie... Look, I like Man of Steel as a science fiction first contact story, and I like all the carnage. I like when aliens come and trounce. I mean, look, I'm a Gundam fan. What happens at the beginning of the first Gundam movie? I mean, the series, they fucking drop Gerard O'Neill orbiting Babylon 5 colony. They drop it on Australia. I mean, give me massive destruction. You know, I look at the beginning of Akira when Tokyo goes up in a nuclear fireball, and I'm like, yeah, I love all that stuff. But for a Superman movie, you know, you've got to make it more personal. Like in Superman the movie, Lois Lane dies. Not a whole Metropolis doesn't die. It's Lois Lane. And the rage on Christopher Reeve's face, when he realizes he's going to violate all of his ethics just to get his love back to life. And God bless Richard Donner for stealing that ending back for himself. But look, here's the thing. Henry Cavill looks good. His outfit is sexy. You know, it's you got the Sturm und Drang, you've got the operatic, you've got the prog rock album cover on those sequences. And it's, you know, it's great. The fight scenes are great. It's, you know, it's terrific. But I think about that movie, and I think about a scene where they're sitting, Superman is shackled, sitting with across from Lois Lane, and it's not an S. It's a symbol for my home planet. It means hope. I mean, there need to be more of that. More scenes of Superman being a human being, but he wasn't Superman yet, so I get it. People like that movie, I think, on a superficial level. They like it because if it was more sentimental and you had that scene with Superman on the roof with Lois Lane hitting on her, people wouldn't like it because they don't know how to hit on girls. And when you see Superman with all of his powers, and he's also the Mac Daddy, Christopher Reeve was a Mac Daddy as Superman. He knew what was up. That guy, he would sneak peeks with his X-ray vision. He would. You know why? Because he had it going on. He knew what was up. He liked girls a lot. Shonen Kaiju says people on their phones in theaters has gotten out of hand, Rob. I've seen it so much this year, it's ridiculous. Yeah, and people are now taking... Look, those people are assholes and wait to when they're in positions 20 years from now, where are they going to be? You know, this is I think our biggest problem with American civilization. You want to know what it is? It is a fundamental lack of respect for our institutions and our fellow citizens. All we are is cynical, and nobody takes anything, no one respects anything. You don't respect your parents, you don't respect your elders, you don't respect your teachers, because there's no one has a reverence for anything anymore. I mean, my problem is for me, movie going was like my church. It was a holy place. And when I was growing up, it didn't matter whether sometimes if you go see Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, kids would run up and down this, you know. But for the most part, when you went to a movie theater, it was a holy place. Nobody talked. Nowadays, people think that they're more important, especially kids. Like, all my friends loved movies. When we went to the movie theater, we didn't want people talking. It was a great experience. Nowadays, no one, especially young people, they are more important than anything that is out into the world. Whatever their needs are more important than what's on the screen. They have no respect and no reverence for it. I went to a classical concert at the Hollywood Bowl, and a bunch of people, probably millennials, young, or I don't know, they were millennials, 20-something people came in. They were talking at a classical concert. And I've told this story before. I almost got into it. I turned around and said a few things, and one guy got in my face, and tough guy, wanted to start something. That's what he said. Thing is, I'm like, when he threatened me, I said, I just stood my ground. You lean forward, and you're like, if you have a problem, and always look somebody in the eye, why don't we go outside and talk about it? And they always back down. Some people are a little more hot-headed, but always push back. Always. The problem is then someone's got a gun and will come shoot you in the face. But I would assume with their friends, and their friends knew that he was being an asshole. You got to push back against those people because everyone thinks that they're more important than all the rest of the world around them. And that's kind of a new phenomenon, and it drives me fucking crazy. It also tells me that those people will never amount to anything in their lives because nothing else matters except what they're doing. Me. But you're right, Shonen, it has. Anthony Gonzalez says, I just finished a Blu-ray set you worked on, Enterprise Season 1. What was your favorite episode? The Andorian incident? Yeah, that's a pretty great episode. Enterprise was always the Andorian incident's really great. It really is. But one of my favorite episodes of Enterprise is an episode called Cogenitor. And it doesn't get, I guess when you look up best Enterprise episodes, if you want to look at this to me is a perfect, Cogenitor is a great Star Trek episode, if I may. You asked about Star Trek, so you're going to get this. In Cogenitor, the Enterprise is studying a star. And when they're studying a star, they realize that there is another alien spacecraft that is unrecognizable to them that is also studying this star. And they make communication, and they meet up, and it turns out this alien race that they've encountered are delightful people. And it turns out that this race needs 3 humanoids to procreate, and a husband and wife, and then there's the cogenitor. And in this civilization that has these delightful people, the cogenitors are basically the lowest form. They're not even treated like, I wouldn't call them human, call them the humanoid race. These delightful people treat their cogenitors as if they're not worth anything at all. They're not educated. They don't get to have a place in society. Their only function is to facilitate procreation. And of course, Trip is kind of appalled by this. And Trip decides, because we as human beings, we are trying to impose our cultural standards on an entirely different alien civilization. And because they were so nice, we're like, how can you treat this cogenitor? How can you, how can you treat this person this way? Because we're imposing, it talked about why should there be a prime directive and why should there be a non-interference directive. I don't want to It's one of the great episodes of Enterprise, and I think it's one of my favorite episodes. I mean, I don't think it's top 10, but if you talk about, I often talk about meat and potatoes Star Trek episodes, and what I mean by that is everyone talks about, you only hear about these are the greatest episodes of Star Trek, but Star Trek is remembered because it has these great meat and potatoes episodes. They don't show up on top 10 lists, but they're great. And Cogenitor, even though I would maybe definitely put it in my top 10 of Enterprise, is a perfect meat and potatoes episode of Star Trek. Kind of like first season episode, like A Taste of Armageddon. Love that episode. But so Cogenitor is Trip trying to bring this Cogenitor and get them to read, get them to be educated, show them how to be a more self-actualized, well-rounded person. Because he's under the false impression that this is just the right thing to do, that certainly all you have to do is get educated, and your position as a cogenitor, you're going to want more out of life, because that's what we would want. Well, let's just say what Trip was trying to do doesn't go the way he thought it was going to go. And if you've never seen Cogenitor, take a gander. And if you've never seen an Enterprise episode, you don't have to, you'll get it. You'll get it. It's a stand. You'll get it. You understand the Star Trek paradigm. It's a really great episode. And boy, you'll look at that and go, why the fuck can't they write something like that in modern Star Trek? How much money do they have? Since 2017, there has not been one episode of modern Star Trek, one, that comes anywhere near what Cogenitor does. And it has a banger of an ending that you won't soon forget. Really, a jaw-dropper. I'm glad you liked the Enterprise box set. They're pretty good. Roger Lay, there were two of us working. So I was doing all the Next Generation documentaries, and Roger Lay was doing the Enterprise documentaries because we were doing it all at once. So I didn't do as much work on the Enterprise documentaries as he did for our round robin stuff, and because I was just immersed, and we were both immersed. I mean, it was two guys, two Star Trek fans, and for 3 years, all we did was interview the people that made Star Trek and get in new versions of the episodes in high definition. I mean, it was like and they paid us. It was like one of the greatest jobs ever. And we were the only people making programming for CBS. The J.J. Abrams movies were being made at that time. Into Darkness was being made, but we were the only people making new programming, documentary programming, but it was awesome. It was awesome. Alvaro Zenos Amaro, like Amaro Ray. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name. Alvaro, of course, Alvaro is a long time, well, a new member here. I met him at the For All Mankind event at the AMC in Century City. You got to go Equimedian. If you want to read an incredible science fiction novel that will really put the zap on you, Equimedian, go get it. It's one of the best books of the year, for real. What does he say? What does he have to say? My estimates, as he says, for 2024 worldwide total viewing hours, 4.5 trillion on social media, 420 billion on movies or streaming, 5 to 6 billion on movies theatrical. Well, Alvaro makes a great point. 4.5 trillion viewing hours on social media. Even I, with my movie collection, I find myself drawn to watch stuff on YouTube just because it's all full of information. If you want to find stuff out, if I want to know how to run a computer program, I want to know how to invest, I want to know about the political situation in Ukraine, where the drones are coming from. I mean, he's absolutely right. Movies have been completely supplanted as the place where people go to find information. And the problem also is that the evolution of movies, especially at the studio level, is to only make spectacle product that is about as resonant as roller coasters. It doesn't mean they still can't make great movies, but most of these things, I mean, as much as I love a great fantasy film, they don't resonate with me like I do. I love all of my movies that I love. I love Mad Max, and I love it all. I don't know why I said Mad Max of all the things, but the movies that I watch over and over again are all about people. They're not genre movies. You know, watching horror films are not usually what I watch, although there's exceptions. Like I love The Exorcist, but not because of the Linda Blair turning into a demon stuff, being possessed by Pazuzu or the devil or whatever. I like it because of the Father Karras stuff, and I like Chris McNeil's stuff. Burke Dennings, Nazi bastard. I like Max von Sydow, you know. But yeah, you're right. Movies are not what they used to be. Roger Paulson gifted 5 Burnettwork memberships, people. I was going to do a membership call tomorrow, and I apologize, I didn't. And I'm going to see if I can figure out a way to do a member call without Roberto's help. But I have to do a sound mix tomorrow for another episode of True Noir. Another banger. More new characters. Tomorrow, episode 4 gets finished. Anthony LaPaglia as Al Capone. Chris Carr as Marianne Beam. More Elliot Ness and more Louis Lombardi as Sergeant Harry Miller. So get to do that. I'm very excited. Let's see. Therio, God of Rage, says, Rob, I got the first 3 episodes of True Noir, my first audio drama, and I fucking adore it. I paid him to say it. No, I didn't. He actually paid me to tell me that. You know what? That means a great deal to me. I have to say that I believe that look, I think I'm a pretty good storyteller as a student. I could never write a book like Equimedian. I'll tell you that right now. I read I'll tell you this, if you want to read some great writing, I don't know if you can, Alvaro, can you get a sample? Go read the first 2 or 3 pages of Alvaro's book. You'll be fucking blown away at how he wields language. That motherfucker can write. And you know, a lot of people can write, you know, but there is a joy in the way he puts words together that leaps off the page. And I'm not just saying that. I do not have any stake in his books, but he is a great fucking writer. And I read the first 2 paragraphs, and then I went and got my girlfriend, and I read her those 2 paragraphs aloud. I was like, because, you know, you meet people, and you're like, I wrote a book. Well, 99% of the people you meet that say they wrote a book, you know, you read it and like, oh, okay. This guy's the real deal. And it's his first novel, but he's been writing for a long time. But go check it out. Go get Equimedian. But so it's really nice. I try, and I've been a student of storytelling, but I've never, ever had the opportunity to truly control something from top to bottom. And, you know, I met Max because of my business partner, Mike Bodden. And working with Max Allan Collins has been amazing, and getting him, you know, this is the book. He adapted his own book, True Detective. By the way, this is a first edition hardcover. I just keep it here because I like to show it to people. And he adapted his own book. And when I started reading the scripts, they're incredible. I mean, they're so beautifully written. It's such a beautiful adaptation. And it's because he wrote the Dick Tracy comic strip for the Chicago Tribune. Was it the Tribune? I think so. So he's written comics. He's written movie novelizations. And then he's written like 100 novels. And to have that script, to be given a script like that, I had to bring everything I knew about production, editorial, directing actors. And I know a lot of people will be like, it's just an audio drama, dude. Well, you know what? The fact that you say you fucking adore it, it's not just an audio drama. Hopefully, the story, and when it unfolds, there's things in the story that resonate with me. I hope it'll resonate with you because it's a great story. It has twists and turns, and wait till you see what happens. And hey, man, if you had said to me at the beginning of 2024, if I would be directing an audio sex scene between Michael Rosenbaum and Katie Sackhoff, I would have said, pshaw. But here we are. And that was tough. How do you do an audio sex scene that doesn't make people laugh? That's a tough one. I didn't think I would ever be doing that in my life. But, you know, you never know. You never know when you're going to do something you've never done before. The sleeper must awaken. Kelvin Wellborn says, I did watch 3 Colors and Double Life of Veronique at the cinema. Kelvin? Well, Kelvin, you're a true cineast. You have good taste. I see what you post. You get good stuff. You get a lot of garbage like the rest of us, but you have good stuff. Your collection is impressive. Coach Sipping Jamma Juice says, what do you think about the dispute between Barbara Broccoli and Amazon. Word is they were trying to water down the Bond IP like Star Wars and Disney. Of course, because that's the corporate playbook. So for those of you who don't know, the Bond franchise is owned by Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. Barbara Broccoli is Albert Broccoli's daughter, and Michael G. Wilson is her half-brother or something like that. So they control the Bond franchise. And MGM, they have a deal with MGM. Amazon acquired MGM. So now Amazon is an overseer of what's going to happen with Bond. But the thing is, they can't do anything with Bond. But here's the thing. Like anybody who has an IP now, let's just spin it off. Let's make let's make a series about 003. Let's do a series when MI6 was created. The corporate playbook. Let's take an IP and exploit it this way. Well, how well has that worked? How well is Star Wars doing? How well is Doctor Who doing? How well is Star Trek doing? How many different IPs are really working? Even Marvel, that works so brilliantly. Look what's happened to that. And yet, these numbnuts, these corporate executives will be like, well, we have to do this. We have to exploit our IP over all these things. What they don't understand, and what Barbara Broccoli is absolutely right about, these people don't know what storytelling is. All they know is a widget. They're like, okay, the Bond movies are product to be sold. Now, I'm a lifelong Bond fan, and you don't look at the James Bond pantheon of films and think, now there's a group of films that always delivered. Talk about a hit and miss franchise. But that's okay. It's okay that it's a hit and miss franchise. But corporations now, they just want to exploit their IPs, not realizing that, well, who's gonna make it good? Blake Lively starred in a movie that Barbara Broccoli produced called The Rhythm Section. Have you heard of it? Female Bond-esque movie. Had a great script. Well, if you have heard of it, okay, good. But I bet a lot of you haven't. It is not easy to make a good movie or a good TV series. But see, a corporation doesn't know that. A corporation is just like, oh, the James Bond franchise, there's been 25 movies since 1962. Why do we only make one movie every couple of years? Why don't we just exploit it and run it into the ground? Because in their mind, all you have to do is make a James Bond movie or a James Bond spinoff, and people will watch it because it's James Bond. What is not understood on a fucking spreadsheet is it has to be good. It has to be good. And all of this corporate thinking, when you're making Coca-Cola, you know what the ingredients are. Coca-Cola's made this way. Or if I'm making a computer game, that's a bad example because the game has to be good. Gaming has the same problem as movies. Whatever, a machine an Apple Watch, things that have to work. Those are easily made. You understand the production process. You know how something's going to work. And then you go out and make it. And then you sell that product. And that's what you get. A movie is not like that. But in corporations, when they're hiring people that didn't even work in the movie business to make a widget to sell. That's what a corporation, that's what a company's doing. We're making this thing to sell to the consumer. Well, there is no spreadsheet that can tell you how to write well. There isn't. And generative AI is not going to be able to write something that isn't an amalgamation of something that they've already seen. It's going to just, which by the way, corporations can't wait for generative AI to do this. I mean, already have you seen, I had heard this was happening. This is something, look into this because, so apparently Spotify, which is supposed to be supporting musicians and authors and musicians and people that write music. So Spotify, what they are doing, they're using AI to, for instance, they go and use an AI program and Spotify generates their own music. Totally AI generated, like say a jazz composition. Well, then they use their own algorithms. They insert their AI generated music that they own and they start inserting it. Like if you're like contemporary jazz and you're listening to contemporary jazz, they'll throw in their AI generated music that is taking analytics away from a real jazz artist. So they're self-dealing. It's kind of like when Chris Carter got pissed at Fox for selling the X-Files to FX for a reduced amount of money. If they went somewhere else, they would have gotten more money for it in syndication. So he sued Fox. Well, Spotify is doing that very thing. They're just going to make a bunch of AI-generated music. Fuck the artists. Then they make money on their own AI-generated systems that people are listening to because they don't know the fucking difference. When you're at work and you have a playlist running, this is what our AI-generated future, this is why we as a people are going to have to decide for ourselves. We have to put our foot down. We have to put our foot down and say no. No. And then somebody will say, well, Rob, what does it matter? If some AI-generated piece of music is, you have a fusion jazz piece and it's really good, who cares if it's AI-generated? That's going to be the question. And a lot of people are going to say it doesn't. But really, we have to decide, and this seems a little hyperbolic, but we're going to have to decide really quickly, as human beings, who do we want to be? What is it that's important to us? And the problem is, we live in a culture where nobody gives a fuck about anything. When you don't have respect and you don't have reverence for things like, look, human beings, when I went to the Evergreen State College, I took this coordinated studies program. We had like 4 professors, and it was called The Making of Meaning. That's what the program was called. Or if, read some Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. But we are the people that decide, human beings decide what is meaningful in our lives. And because we're sentient beings that can question, why am I here? Those questions, those fundamental, unanswerable questions lead to things like art. And human beings, whatever creativity, I don't care if you're crocheting a bag, if you're painting a picture, there's some artist that hangs from a swing and spins around, and it's almost like when you'd go to the country fair in the old days and dip a pencil into the paint and pull it out. Well, watching an artist do that, whatever creative endeavor that people do, that creative impulse comes out of us. And one of the things about AI is a lot of these creative endeavors that we listen. Somebody makes a painting, somebody makes a song, somebody makes a movie, somebody makes an audio drama. It's all human beings collectively doing this. AI can copy all of it. All of it. In seconds. Somebody could do an audio drama and you know what? It'd be good. Fine. But you know what? I made True Noir, and I've been working on it. I've been recording voice actors since May 27th. I'm done recording the voice actors now, but I directed those actors. I'm editing it. All the decisions, I'm working with a sound designer that I've already worked with. All of these decisions we made. There's nothing AI in it. It was all our decision making. And what we get when I hear a little twinkle in an actor's voice, when Michael Rosenbaum came down and we spent 4 days just recording the narration, we didn't stop until we got it right. Every performance, every line of dialogue that Michael Rosenbaum says was something we worked at together, that Michael Rosenbaum brought his acting prowess and nailed it. And every time he said a line, he would do a line different ways. And he wasn't satisfied. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to do one more. And he would nail it. He would figure out how he wanted it to be. AI can't do that. It'll generate an approximation of that. But I would like to believe that human beings are eventually, we will be able to tell the difference. But eventually, generative AI is going to figure out all those things. It will listen to everything. It will learn on everything. And it will figure out even the subtle nuances in a human voice or the way people write. Because it's going to look at everything. And then it's going to be indistinguishable from reality. But the one thing I don't think generative AI will ever get to do is really surprise anybody. Because all of the surprises it will have learned from surprising things that human beings already thought up. So the question is going to be, and there's going to be a lot of forces that push back, and ultimately, most people don't give a fuck. And this is not a criticism. This is just a reality. Nobody gives a fuck about this stuff. Nobody cares about Star Trek books except Alvaro and me. I mean, there's just things people don't like. They don't care. And I understand human beings are first and foremost, how does it affect me? Am I going to be able to feed my family? Am I going to have a happy life? And if why would anybody care about, who cares what paintings are hanging in what museums around the world? How many museums do we get to visit in our lifetimes? How many in our own country, in the United States, how many states have you been to? You know, how many places have you visited, and you don't give a fuck or care about what the lives of people anywhere than your normal sphere of existence is? And this is not an indictment. This is just truthful. We have to concentrate on what's in front of us. Hell, man, sometimes I don't get out of this garage studio in a week because I'm sitting here. If I'm not talking to you on this, I'm not looking at a little green light. I'm editing this show. And then I realized, I took a car trip the other day. I had to go into LA. I'm like, this is the first time I've like driven anywhere 5 miles away from my house in weeks. And it really comes down to, but here's the thing. We need to start thinking about and changing our minds. It's probably going to take, 1,000 years or whatever. We have to start thinking about, and again, I bring up this guy all the time, but Yuval Harari, who's an Israeli historian, he wrote these 2 books, Sapiens and Homo Deus. And Sapiens is this 100-year history of the world. I mean, 100,000-year history of humanity. Very entertaining book. And he goes on these really great tangents and everything. Totally entertaining book. But he asks this question on like the very last pages. He said, now human beings are at a place in our existence where, putting aside religion, putting aside our differences, if there was some way that we could all together somehow collectively ask ourselves, who do we, there's one race of humans on this planet. We have different ethnicities, to be sure, but there is one race of people on this planet. Human fucking beings. That's it. And our differences are only because of various geographical regions our ancestors came from. But now that we can travel everywhere, those differences, and when you meet more and more people and you travel, you realize that, yeah, people have differences, but in their hearts, they're pretty much the same. Unless they've been really corrupted by various bad ideologies. But when you get people alone, you sit down, you have a meal with them, you can hang with pretty much everybody. Who are we going to be? And I think it's a question that AI is going to demand of us very, very quickly, because I don't think a lot of people, because they haven't been paying attention, unless you're Justine Bateman, they're not thinking about where AI is going to take us. It's not going to be fucking Skynet. It's going to be the fact that you worked for H&R Block for 25 years and, you're close to retirement, and then you realize that H&R Block is closing your branch because they don't need anybody who knows about tax law anymore, because AI can do it much quicker and cheaper for free than you can. And what's going to happen when that's true of everybody? What happens when generative AI works for medical insurance companies and looks at your health and denies you coverage in a second? Because AI says, well, this person, there's no reason to insure them. I mean, we're going to live in that world soon. And it's going to be very Gattaca-esque. All right, where am I? What is this show about? Rob's ramblings, certainly. I was talking about James Bond. This is a story about James Bond. I remember where I was now. Storytelling, corporations, all of that. Look, corporations want to use generative AI so they don't have to pay authors. I mean, we saw it in Robert Altman's The Player. Peter Gallagher is like, he takes the newspaper and he sees like, he goes, you can just make a movie up right here. And he's like, it's something about the East Los Angeles or something. You put Jimmy Smits in it and you got a sexy stand and deliver. And that's it. That's what's going to happen. So Barbara Broccoli, now it's so funny that she's defending what James Bond should be. The problem is, I would say to Barbara, James Bond is past his time. James Bond is no longer relevant in our world. I mean, I love James Bond movies. I've seen them all a dozen times. I love them. I bought them on every format. James Bond is a character that no longer works. You can try and make it. You can make him work, but then he's not going to be James Bond anymore. As Judi Dench said, say it with me now, from 1995's GoldenEye. You're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. You're a product of the Cold War. Indeed. Now it's time for somebody new. I don't know who that is, but I think it sucks that Amazon wants to turn... And you know what? It's not going to work. They'll fuck it up. It's like what Al Capone says in True Noir episode 4. They're going to fuck it up, hella. What I built. Yeah. The Brujo says, great Star Trek episode. Wait. Oh, the great Star Trek episode. You're talking about Cogenitor. Another thing going for it is the late, great Andreas Katsoulis playing the Vissian captain. Vissian. See, I would have known that, but you're right. The Vissian captain. Andreas Katsoulis, who played Tomalak, who played Jakar. Come on. Wasn't Jakar's transformation in Babylon 5 one of the great sci-fi stories that was ever on television? And Londo Mollari, too. But Jakar, man, the character you love to hate until you fell in love with him because he was noble. The Robo producer says, the next Bond, how about Tom Hardy? Jason Statham. Tom Hardy and Jason Statham, I don't think, work as Bond. You know, you need somebody. I'll tell you, Rob Stark in The Bodyguard, he was very Bond-esque. I think you need, look, the problem with James Bond is we need to come up, if you're going to make a new James Bond movie and make it work, what would James Bond be like now? Like, what would his background be? And is there even anybody that could have, I mean, what does an intelligence operative look like? The world is so different than it used to be. Everything is asymmetrical now. So where would Bond come from? And, you know, one of the things about, I think, that the James Bond movies, our world, we don't even have anybody cool trying to do something. Like, when you had Carl Stromberg building Atlantis in Spy Who Loved Me, what did he want to do? Eliminate everybody on the surface world and have his genetically perfect people repopulate the planet. Give me some fantasy megalomaniac. Of course, they remade that with Moonraker and Hugo Drax. Same deal. But ever since then, like, all these people in Bond movies, it's like, yeah, we'll nuke this, we'll kill this person, we'll steal this, it will blow up England with a laser. You know, it's like, it seems so small now. And the thing about James Bond is he existed in a world where there was still people that believed. We saw an example of it in what happened in Germany. We now have religious extremists that believe dying is a promotion, and they're quick to do it. You know, and I don't understand that. We have a 14th century ideology captured by the imams, and you're dealing with an ideology, let's kill everybody that's an infidel or doesn't believe what we believe. And if there's people that don't want to stay alive a little while longer, that they believe that, hey, let's martyr ourselves during jihad, how do you fight those people? How is James Bond supposed to fight those people? You know, I don't know. It's an interesting question, but watching somebody drive their BMW, if you've seen the video of what happened tonight, drove a BMW at speed through a busy pedestrian Christmas market. Think about that. And the guy was a fucking doctor from Saudi Arabia. A doctor. I mean, you know, I can't even... James Bond would be like... It's when you see ordinary people who are doing this kind of evil for whatever reason, because their ideology fucks them up, what do you do? How do you combat that? Does James Bond even belong in a world like that? You watch something like that and you ask yourself, in what universe? I mean, it really makes me wonder if with all of our art and all of our accomplishments, do we deserve to endure? But I think Tom Hardy and Statham, I mean, they're great guys for what they do. But I think Tom Hardy is look, James Bond is a debonair character. I'm not saying Tom Hardy couldn't, but, you know, when he plays the craze or he plays Bronson, yeah, I mean, that's not James Bond. He's a badass. You ever see the movie Locke? It's all in a car. It's all him on the phone. It's a great movie. Check it out. Timula the Spider Monkey. What is going on? Haven't seen you in a while. Ho, ho, ho. Just stopping by to drop some holiday quatloos to the coolest guy on YouTube. Love you, R&B. Stay funky. You mean, okay, you can stay funky like George Michael with the song Too Funky, or funky like Prince, or funky like, you know, Kool and the Gang. Or I was listening to a little Earth, Wind, and Fire earlier. I love funk, but, you know, George, a lot of stuff going on. I will stay funky, but I'll always smell good. I hope. Good to see you, man. Aurora Uplinks says, for Snow White to win you over, what's needed in it? Well, look. Here's the thing about Snow White. It was a classical tale, and you're remaking the Disney version of that classical tale. I mean, it wasn't like she wasn't sleeping for 300 years or whatever the original story was about. But, I mean, I still think that it might be a good, charming movie. I think they had to pivot midstream, but I just think that changing Snow White and you're going to make her empowered, they have to save their kingdom and all that. What you're doing is you're now taking... I mean, Snow White is not Princess fucking Mononoke. And, I mean, to me, that would have been a much more... If you want to remake something in live action, that would... I mean, please don't do that. And if somebody's going to do it, don't do that. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry I put that out in the world. Don't make a live action remake of Princess Mononoke. Watch the original. And well, what about Howl's Moving Cat? No. Castle of Cagliostro? No. Nausicaa? Maybe Nausicaa. But don't do that. Snow White just has to be good. A good story well told, but there's nothing that I've seen in it that makes me want to go see it. I love the original Snow White. I worked on Disney. I worked on the first big DVD release of Snow White. I was immersed in Disney movies for a while, and I don't know, man. I don't know. It just has to be good. I don't know if it can be. Because I think that they immediately tried to turn it into something it wasn't. It's like, well, we can't just do a classical fairy tale. And this is the problem. They're remaking their live action classics, but then they're like, well, now we have to update them. You had Rachel Ziegler, and I don't have any ill will toward her. I've never met her. She's a beautiful girl. She was great in West Side Story. I'm sure she's going to be extremely talented. And all she is a product of the culture she's in. It's not like she came out of the woods with some smart mouth that needs to be shut up. She's just a kid. She's just somebody making her way in the world that got a lot of success. I do not begrudge her. I don't get mad when she says things. I don't, and I don't think anybody should. But she wasn't doing her movie any favors. But when you come out, the movie itself was compromised because it was made, and you're like, the first thing they thought of was, well, we can't make Snow White the way it was. We've got to change it. Got to make it a movie about female empowerment and all that. We can't have a prince save her in the end. Well, if you're going to do that, don't do it. Because you're changing something fundamentally, and what you're doing is you're injecting present-day politics, or whatever you want to call it, into a story that isn't from the present day. Make something new and original, and tell that story in a new and interesting and original way. That's what I don't get. But you know what? They don't know how. They don't know how. They're looking at Snow White. We're going to remake that. That's what we're going to do. Because, God forbid, somebody should do... Look, I think there should be all kinds of female empowerment stories. Not that there hasn't been all through time, but give me a female empowerment story that's new, that has something interesting to say, that isn't just something that exists to be about female empowerment. Tell me a great story. Give me great characters. That's the secret. That's what it should say for corporations. How do we make money? Great stories, well told, by people who know how to do them. Well, that's not enough information. How do I know that? Well, then why do you have this fucking job? You should know. You work for a movie company. You don't even know about movies. You haven't seen movies. You don't know how movies were made. You never made a movie because you came over from fucking Kraft or Procter & Gamble or some shit like that. But you're now making decisions about how a Snow White movie should get made. Fuck you. But that's what we get. That's our world today. Brendan Lucas says, Gen AI probably acts as a strange objective audit of the art form. I guess the 3 Mile track was never worth dirt if it can be replicated so easily. Conversely, he goes on to say, generative AI really struggles with the structure of a film script, not to mention dialogue, not saying it's far away, but screenplays fare well. Well, that's the problem, because generative AI can't think. All generative AI can do is look at a screenplay as algorithmic, or it can look at it and go, okay, here's the structure of a screenplay. But it doesn't know why that structure exists. But then generative AI can look into it and it can read but there's no mind behind generative AI that's learning. not like cognitive. We haven't reached the singularity. So we don't have Hal, who can think, or the operating system in her, or even Robert Vaughn as Proteus in Demon Seed. I live. If you guys haven't seen Demon Seed, boy, that's not a very, I guess you can say, not a very politically correct movie. Julie Christie gets captured in a smart house by an AI named Proteus with Robert Vaughn's voice, so it's the greatest thing ever, who basically wants to procreate and figures out a way to rape her and impregnate. Oh, see, now I've got, this thing has been demonetized. I said, see, they will demonetize my stream because I said that word. But it's what happens in the movie. And then this AI, well, I won't tell you what happens at the end, but it's got a great ending. When I saw it as a kid, I was like, no way. Yep, I said that word. See, I fell into a trap. I'm just relating what happened in a movie in 1976. Dean Koontz wrote that book. Great. Anyway, but you're right. Generative AI cannot write. Not yet. Tim the Spider Monkey says, what do you make of Lucasfilm giving the go-ahead to Hot Toys to make Legends Dark Empire Luke when no one from Disney, Star Wars, or Lucasfilm's social media even mentioned Tom Veitch? Is it Veitch? When he died, that was the artist who worked on Dark Empire. Okay, here's the thing. None of those people know anything about this. They don't know anything. They're not hiring, fans. And I'm sure that somebody, I can't wait. I didn't get the artisan. I'm going to have to buy it on the secondhand market. If anyone has a line on the artisan version of the Hot Toys Dark Empire Luke, I really want it. If you got two. But yeah, they don't even know. They don't know. There's nobody at Disney that knows. So if you've read Dark Empire, hell, they weren't even going to give Timothy Zahn credit. They were already doing Grand Admiral Thrawn, and somebody said, for the animated shows, and it's like, we should probably tell him we're doing this. And they brought him up to Luke. I did a show about this. They brought him up to Lucasfilm, and they basically, said, hey, we'd love to. They were already doing it, but they coerced him into allowing it to happen. And we'll let you write some more Thrawn books, but now you have to write our version of Thrawn. It's so insane. It's so crazy how people do this kind of business. Because look, Hollywood, I've got two great interviews that I have yet to drop, and I was going to drop them for the 1000th episode, but True Noir got in the way. I interviewed Diane Duane, one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, and I interviewed David Mack, another one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, 6 years apart. And Diane Duane goes off about tie-in fiction. Tie-in fiction is considered disposable, like movie novelizations, totally disposable. They just think of them as marketing tools. Well, the people that write Star Trek tie-in fiction, the people that write Predator novels or Warhammer novels, take your pick. They're fans. So the best Star Trek novels, you've got people that are writing these beautiful novels about, and they're extrapolating about the Star Trek universe in ways they couldn't on the TV show, and they're doing it beautifully. And the people that wrote these books are thinking, if A, B, C, and D are true, then E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P are true too. And they write these books where they flesh out the universe, and they do such a wonderful job. Now, I have been a big proponent of going back, like, why not adapt? Why didn't the first Alien versus Predator movie adapt the Dark Horse comic? That comic was a banger. You know why? Because people in Hollywood were like, we're not going to adapt a comic book. Well, you'll adapt Avengers. You'll do Ed Brubaker's run on the Winter Soldier, and you'll go make that movie. Why not an Alien? Because, Predator's owned by somebody else. We're not gonna look. They should, because the people that wrote that comic love aliens and they love Predator, and they put them together and wrote a great story. Who cares where it came from? The studios don't even know it exists. I don't understand why there isn't a group at all of these studios. Why isn't there a group at Paramount that knows everything about Star Trek novels? Now they just pilfer from them willy-nilly and don't credit anybody. And they're stealing from science fiction writers outside of Star Trek. And like when Alex Kurtzman does an interview and says, yeah, we were really inspired by Ursula K. Le Guin's Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus. Inspired? You fucking stole it. And you didn't give her any credit. But you'll say in an interview that it's okay, because no one even cares anymore. She's dead. And it's gross. It is so gross. It drives me crazy to see you could be making. There's great stories out there. Go do the Dark Empire. If I was J.J. Abrams and someone came to me, because he probably hasn't read it, but the first thing I would do is roll into, if Kathleen Kennedy put the clarion call out for, people, pitch us an idea. I would roll in with the Dark Empire comics and the Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire trilogy and go, look, these two things came out at the same time. They brought Star Wars back into the public consciousness. You had the Dark Empire comic series, and you had the Zahn trilogy. Well, those books began, the entire post-Return of the Jedi expanded universe began with those things. Why not start there? It's right there. It's right there in those comics. You don't have to look very hard. It's right there. No one even thought of that. They don't even know. There's nobody. You think it? Now I'm sure Dave Filoni knows, sure. But does anybody else who works at the corporate level? Fuck no. And nobody was asking either. There's so many great stories that are out there. They're doing this Star Trek prequel movie that they're threatening to green light. I've heard about it. Why don't they go back to a script that they already own? That Eric Jedrinson, supervising producer of Band of Brothers. It's not perfect. He only got to write one draft, but it is exactly what the Star Trek franchise needs. It's got Starfleet Academy in it. It's got the Romulans attacking Earth, wanting to kick the Vulcans off Earth, and they're like, if you don't kick all your Vulcans off Earth, we're going to destroy your planet. It's about a Doolittle raid into Romulan space. It's about testing new warp technology. It's fucking great. It opens with a Starfleet graduation ceremony where you have a regatta of hover catamarans in San Francisco Bay, and all of the Admiralty and all the Vulcans and all the Starfleet Academy people are looking at these kids racing on boats into San Francisco Harbor. It's a fucking dope way to open a movie. And you meet all these kids watching them do things that they're good at. Make that. They own it. They don't fucking know. And you know what? That means somebody else doesn't get paid. And Eric Jedrinson co-wrote Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning with Chris McQuarrie. Eric Jedrinson writes the script. They go do a new draft. And who directs it? Chris fucking McQuarrie, who loves Star Trek. You're already in business with Skydance and Paramount. But no, there's nobody there that even knows what the fuck I'm talking about. It's a slam fucking dunk. But anyway, they're getting the guy who directed the USS Callister for Black Mirror. I understand. Okay. That seems reasonable. Or you could have Chris McQuarrie direct your Star Trek movie. What do you think? He's already working for you. How much money has he made? You've already given how much money does Mission Impossible 8 cost? But nobody knows this. It drives me crazy, I'm telling you. Where was I? I'm so off the rails here. I'm just going to keep going. It's just your questions. I am not going to stop until I've gone through these entire super chats. Let me see. You know what? I think I've missed a few tips. Tips are. I have to look in a different place for tips. And let me just make sure if I have or haven't. Maybe I haven't. I don't see any. But I thought some tips came in. I'm not sure. I don't want to miss them because sometimes I do. And it doesn't look like it. Maybe. We'll see. So, Brendan Lucas says, James Bond will probably be moonlighting as a general, as an ISIS before becoming a billionaire from a vacuum company before having a mountain accident. Yeah, how do you make Bond work? The Bond movies, the Daniel Craig, I love Casino Royale, but the rest of the movies, the sad sack Bond thing didn't work for me. I'm a quantum apologist, but that's only because it's part of Casino Royale. Skyfall, a movie where James Bond repeatedly fails. Fail. That talk about a movie, and then they're copying The Dark Knight. They got to reinvent the entire franchise if they want people to care. I love No Time to Die. James Bond dies. At the end of the credits, James Bond will return. Come on. Let's see. Dee's Webos has been a member for 26 months. Thank you. Thomas Logan said, could the Spotnitz scream have killed Kurtzman's Trek deal the day he was pitching to Viacom? Had you been there, would you too have been run out of the room? Well, the thing is, here's how deal making works. I mean, J.J. Abrams is a you're talking about J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams, Alex Kurtzman he wrote Star Trek 09, co-wrote it with Bob Orci, and he wrote Star Trek Into Darkness. So Alex Kurtzman probably had something in his contract about being attached to a Star Trek TV show. So, I don't think you could have stopped that from happening. But I don't have any power. I don't have any power at all in Hollywood. I don't wield any power in any boardrooms. If I walked into those boardrooms, they wouldn't take me seriously. People don't take me seriously because I do this YouTube show. That's why I hope people, when they hear True Noir, they can hear that, well, I do know what I'm doing. Hopefully it'll lead me to get to do something more, or I'll just to keep doing more audio dramas. But yeah, you can't, if you have to be within that ecosystem to get any headway into that ecosystem, and especially television. I really don't know much about that. I have no credibility at that. What about Matt Smith as Bond, says Deez Webos. Matt Smith, he's great in House of the Dragon. I loved him as Doctor Who. I don't think I think that Bond has to be, not that Matt Smith can't be dashing, but I think Bond has to be more of a matinee idol kind of a person. And I think Matt Smith has a unique look to him that really, really works. I don't know if he would be... Look, Matt Smith's face means that he would be very recognizable. I don't think Matt Smith would be a good spy. You would need somebody more generic looking. Generically handsome that people... Look, the thing about Sean Connery is we know how cool he is, but in a crowd, and if you're walking down the street in New York or in Glasgow or something... He could be walking in a suit, and I don't think a lot of people would pay much attention to him. I think a good spy can flit in and out of different environments, act a different way, and people don't see him as the same person. Whereas Matt Smith's face, I love Matt Smith's face, but it's a very unique face, and I don't think it would suit spycraft well because people would remember him. Brendan Lucas said, I think you skipped my super chat about Secret Level. That is very possible. I got the James Bond thing. I did the Strange Object. Is there one before that? Did I miss that? Let me go back and see. I did miss this. So Brendan asks if I've seen the Secret Level series from Amazon. I can't help but feel the backdoor pilot is back in full form. So many universes Bezos can do. I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to see it. But yes. Everyone likes it. I'm sure it's really intriguing, and I think you're right. I think it's so it deals with these various video game worlds and things like that. I think it's a really cool idea. I haven't seen any of it. By the way, can I just say one of my most eagerly awaited things in 2026 is Capcom is rebooting Onimusha. Hail, hail. I love the Onimusha franchise, and it looks classic. I mean... The gauntlet, oh man, I saw that trailer. I was like, wow, I can't wait. I love the Onimusha and the Devil May Cry franchises. Bring them back. Now, if I can just get SSX back, life is good. Bert says, happy winter solstice, 1:21 Pacific Standard Time, the 21st of December. Wow, crazy. Well, winter solstice. If I had alcohol, I would take a drink. Marco's been a member for 27 months and says, why are people's reactions to media so hyperbolic and overexcited? No objectiveness anymore. People already made their mind up about a Superman film. 10 out of 10. I don't know. Like, I really don't know. And first of all, when Man of Steel came out, it was divisive. And now there's all this retconning that people love Zack Snyder. I get it. A lot of people, I understand why people do. I mean, I for what they are, I really do enjoy Zack Snyder's trilogy. But there's a trilogy. I don't understand why people are like, it's like Rebel Moon Part 1 and 2, the Army of the Dead universe. I think Zack Snyder's got more to do, but I would say that we got his trilogy. Now, do you want to see more? Here's the thing. In all honesty, let's say Zack Snyder came back and made 2 more Justice League movies. Do you think we're going to get the 2 Towers in Return of the King? Unless they're going to change my life forever, we're just going to get more of the same. Now, sure, you might get the ending of whatever storyline that is, but I already know what that ending of the storyline is going to be. You know what it's going to be? The Justice League defeats Darkseid. Maybe he'll get the anti-life equation. We've already seen it. There's nothing that Zack Snyder is going to do if he gets to make Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3 that is going to surprise us, that is going to be something earth-shattering. I think he made 3 movies. We got to see what Zack Snyder's vision was. And if you dig that sort of thing, and I like it for what it is, it's a different kind of a vision that only he could bring us. Why aren't people happy with that? Why aren't they happy with the idea that we're going to get a totally different vision of Superman? And why don't people understand that here's somebody that has the weight of the studio on his shoulders? If he fucks up, it's going to be the most spectacular fuck up in Hollywood history. I think James Gunn knows what the stakes are here. His entire rest of his career is on the line because he's the head of the studio and he's directing a Superman movie. I mean, I know James Gunn a little, not for a long time, but I work with him. I really like James Gunn. I read his book, The Toy Collector. You know, he has a singular way of thinking, and I think he can win this one. I want to live in a world where people sit back and go, I wonder what his Superman movie is going to be like. But, you know, he's made a lot of stuff before that has been divisive. The 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, a lot of people didn't like 2 as much as I did. You know, I think that's a great, very solid trilogy. It has a lot of heart in it. I liked Slither. I just want to see what he's going to do with Superman because I think he's going to make a fantastical movie, the likes of which we haven't seen before. And that is enough to get me excited. I would not be excited if Zack Snyder came back to make 2 new Justice League movies because we wouldn't be getting anything surprising or new in them. So, but I don't know why. I think people are too wrapped up in, like I don't understand. When I was growing up, I would go see any science fiction movie. I didn't care if it cost $2 or $100 million. I'd go. We'd all go. And we'd have a great time. And it's so weird to me that people are looking like comparing and contrasting. I don't like this suit. Look, you don't know what the tone of the movie is going to be. You know, we see all this stuff, but admittedly, to be fair, on the flip side of that, we've had a lot of things that we've seen that weren't good. And I get it. A lot of fantastical things like Black Adam, The Flash. I like The Flash. Sue me. I had fun with that movie. But there's been a lot of stuff that we've seen that would lead people to believe that James Gunn is not going to bring us the kind of Superman movie. I mean, people want to watch a Superman movie, and I don't know what they want out of it. Like, what do you want? What do you want out of a Superman movie? Do you want Superman 3? Do you want Superman 4, The Quest for Peace? We know you don't. And half of you hated Man of Steel. Superman doesn't kill. And that's another thing. Why? In this particular, when I watched Superman Return, Man of Steel, what was Superman supposed to do with Zod? Well, Superman doesn't kill. Really? Well, what would you do if you're Superman? What are you going to do with a Kryptonian that's stronger than you? Throw him in jail? That's not going to work. What are you going to do? He had no choice. And then people got mad. Well, people got mad because why? Because that movie offered no joy and it was apocalyptic. And at the end of that movie, where was the happiness? But it was cool. I don't know. Matthew Coulinod says, favorite comic book runs of all time. You know, I think I loved my favorite comic. I loved the comic book that got me back into comic books. There were 2, really. Camelot 3000, by Mike Barr and Brian Boland, and the Doug Mensch and Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight run from issue 1 through 30. Those got me back into reading comic books. The new era, the 80s era of comics. And then other runs I really loved. One of the things I started to pick up was the George Perez and Marv Wolfman New Teen Titans. And when I say runs, I mean they went all the way from the regular newsprint series into the Baxter series with that second Trigon story, and I love that. You know, I loved X-Men from about X-Men 96 up through like the 300s. I mean, but American Flag, Howard Chaykin's American Flag, I loved. You know, I did love Simonson's run on Thor, Byrne's run on Fantastic Four. I love the first 24 issues of Alpha Flight that Byrne did. That was when Guardian Vindicator got blown up and then came back in issue 24. That was some crazy shit. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different. I mean, I collected comics for so long, but those are things that stick out to me. I mean, I liked whole run Peter David on the Hulk. You know, I love Peter David on the Hulk. I loved Mike Grell's. I love John Sable freelance. I love Timothy Truman on Grimjack. You know, was it John Ostrander and Timothy Truman? The thing is, there are not a lot of modern runs. Like, I liked Hickman's X-Men. A lot of people didn't. When I read House of X and Powers of 10, I was like, this is wild. They made the X-Men were so stale, and I've been reading the X-Men for 30 years. And when Hickman went all sci-fi and alternative lifestyle and all that, the Krakoan era, you know what was really cool? And I didn't read it when it first came out, and I bought the hardcover, was Judgment Day. The Eternals, the X-Men, and the Avengers. I love that comic. I love the idea that now that the X-Men had the power of resurrection, that Druig of the Eternals is like, well, they've become too deviant. That power of resurrection makes them too deviant, so we have to destroy the X-Men. I thought that was a great idea. That was a new comic idea. I thought it was a great idea. I really liked that. I mean, unfortunately, other people came in and it wasn't. Hickman's run on Fantastic Four is really good. I like Hickman. That's something new that I read that I really liked. I mean, I like paper dolls, paper girls, paper dolls. I thought that was pretty good. I mean, I'm looking around and seeing, I mean, there's a lot of things. But look, my favorite comic book of all time, and I don't care what you say now, Sandman. Neil Gaiman's Sandman is my favorite comic book of all time because it is a comic book series about storytelling itself. And I loved it. I was totally enchanted by it. I loved everything that it did. Not equally, but the Season of Mist storyline, which they're adapting for the second season of the Netflix show, I cannot wait to see. But yeah, I mean, I have to sit down and really think about, because there's so many. I like different comic book runs for different reasons. Like Howard Chaykin did a 3-volume prestige series for DC called Twilight that I really loved, and then the Legion of Superheroes, the 5 years later storyline. I love that, even though Keith Giffen changed his art style. But I really loved it. It was so intriguing when the Time Trapper kept destroying history. Like it was wild. I love that. It was wild. I enjoyed. There's so much stuff. I look around. I mean, I love Kurt Busiek and George Perez's run on Avengers. I love that. It was great. You know, I just bought the second one of these. Speaking of Micronauts, I love this. I love the run of Micronauts. Bill Mantlo and Michael Golden drawing Micronauts. That's great stuff. I gotta file those away. I just got this. That's the first one. I have the second one too. Swords and Starships says Star Trek Picard was the worst Kurtzman Drek ever. Only your eloquent argument on Open Bar convinced me to watch Picard Season 3, and you were correct. Look, Picard Season 3 is not perfect, and it goes very grimdark. It really does. But what I loved about Star Trek Picard Season 3, and, you know, haters can come at me all they want, I thought what they did with the Next Generation crew itself was really interesting, and I thought it was respectful. Dr. Crusher becoming a doctor without borders. And I didn't mind that she had Jack, a son with Picard, that she ran away with. And when she says, I'm not going to let space took my husband and space took my son because he went off and became a traveler. I loved all that. And I thought it was great. I love what they did with everybody. I love what they did with Worf. I love what they did with Geordi. I hated what they did. What they did with Picard and Star Trek. Look, here's the problem. When you allow actors, you have to let Patrick Stewart weigh in. He doesn't know anything about Star Trek mythology. He's Patrick Stewart. He doesn't care. He says his lines and goes. What he wanted to do was inject his own life into Star Trek, so he had something to play. And that's what he did. He brought his own familial trauma back, which had no place in Star Trek, but they had to appease him in seasons 1 and 2. I get it. But what you end up with, the same thing happened with Brent Spiner and Patrick being able to come up with storylines for Star Trek Insurrection and Nemesis and all that. It doesn't work because it's weird to say, but Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner don't know much about Star Trek. When I interviewed Brent Spiner for the Next Generation documentaries, he told me he never watched Star Trek. He said the only time he ever watched Star Trek was when he had to go to see the movies because he was contractually obligated to go. And I believe that. Michael Dorn watched every episode. He knew every episode of Star Trek. He's a huge movie fan. But Brent Spiner, he did it. There was no reason. And his character doesn't go anywhere. He does the same thing all the time. I mean, he's great at it. But then you have to let these actors weigh in. And the problem with letting actors weigh in on their own storylines is they're not writers. They're not writers. And so they think, okay, I'm going to bring my generational trauma or my horrible family upbringing, and we're going to inject it into Picard's backstory. His mother, killed herself or what. And you're like, what? 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 And then you're watching this going, what is this? And that was problematic. So Swords and Starships. I'm glad you got to watch Star Trek Picard Season 3. Brendan Lucas says, I agree with you about Bond. Ian Fleming stretched his inspiration from encounters with German spies in World War II for years. I guess you have to stop at one point. Well, you know what? Here's the problem. When you have a successful, venerable franchise that's existed for as long as Bond has, it still makes money. So people think rather than create... I don't understand why people wouldn't want to create a new franchise. Well, because it's really hard. But I mean, and we haven't seen, if you think about in our action sci-fi, the John Wick franchise is really one of the only new franchises that's, you got 4 movies, you got Ballerina, a spin-off movie coming out, and you had the Continental TV series. And somebody would watch John Wick 5 if they made it. And the films are certainly worthy. But where are all the new franchises? It's bizarre to me. I don't understand. Why aren't people making new franchises? Except Taylor Sheridan. He's got Lioness. He's got the Yellowstone franchises and their spinoffs. He's got Landman now. Where? And he was an actor. Where's the new franchises, man? Where are they? Echo Base Network. How are you guys? Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, R&B. I saw Order 42 review True Noir, and am looking forward to checking it out. That was a great review. I don't know him well, and it was a really nice review. Need to get you back on a live stream sometime to talk about it and the current state of Hollywood IPs. Love to anytime. I love you guys. Let's do it. Brendan Lucas says, regarding Secret Level, there was a short film about Outer Worlds, which is an Obsidian property. Obsidian almost went bankrupt 10 years ago, and Outer Worlds was conceived by the guy that coded Fallout. Yeah, if they're doing that as kind of an incubator to see what sticks, which other people have tried before, it's not a bad way to do it. Brendan Luke, so I think I will watch that. I got to find out more about that. I'm going to watch that over Christmas. I've just been so True Noir. That's all I've been doing. Brendan Lucas says, it's just amazing watching video game properties that were drawn up in a kind of panic to stop a studio going out of business. Could be a TV series. Yeah, again, the thing is, true creatives, people that really understand storytelling, are few and far between. And as a friend of mine, a producer I greatly admire, a man named Roy Lee, he finds, I don't know where he gets them, but he finds the best scripts in Hollywood. Even if you don't like he had Barbarian, Strange Darling, were all movies that he produced. Boy Kills World, which, why didn't Lionsgate promote the hell out of that instead of The Crow? I don't know. But he's got a movie coming out next month it comes out January 31st, called Companion. I read the script for that John Jack Quaid stars in, The Boys, Jack Quaid. The script was great, and the trailer looks really good, and I can't wait. Roy's also producing The Long Walk, the Richard Bachman book, a.k.a. Stephen King book, that was published in 1979. It was a cult novel in my junior high school. I can't wait to see that movie. Francis Lawrence directed it, and the script, again, was really good. So, yeah, all this stuff. Echo Base Network says, I just got Batman vs. Predator 2 comics. I read the first storyline, and they were my first comics I ever read. Such a cool story. I wish we could get more cool adaptations like this in the movies. I know. I mean, I don't know why people don't go back and look at that stuff. I mean, how many literary adaptations have there been in Hollywood history? So why wouldn't you go get See, the thing is, a comic book that is based on a movie is, I mean, I don't know if you'd call it, is it ghettoized? They look down on it. Like, why would you not just look at the movie and make a sequel to the movie itself? Why would you go to a comic book to give you an idea to make a sequel to a Predator or an Alien movie? And I would say, well, because it's good, and the peoples that drew it and the peoples that wrote it, they love the franchise, so they came up with a story that was good, and it went through an editorial process, and people made it, and it was kick-ass. You can read the reviews of it, and the story is self-evident, just because it's a comic book. And in the meantime, Marvel's making Ed Brubaker's Winter Soldier run, which, by the way, I read the entire Winter Soldier run in omnibus form one lazy Sunday. I think it was 3 omnibuses long. And then I got into Secret Invasion and The Siege. Like, why isn't the next Thor movie The Siege? They've got Asgard on Earth. Bring in some Norman Osborn. I mean, you can get a hot toy of Norman Osborn as Iron Patriot, the Evil Iron, the leader of the Dark Avengers. I need to get that hot toy too. I don't know. Darth Plato, what's up, dude? Says Gunn's Superman looks like it's using the movie to build a new DC universe in place of telling a real Superman story. And how many villains are there? It feels like Spider-Man 3. Dude, wait to see it first. You gotta wait to see it first. They're showing you the world it takes place in. They're setting the tone. I don't think there's a lot of people in it because those people exist in that world. There's all kinds of superheroes. Gunn even said, don't think Crypto's story is indicative of what you saw in the trailer. I think James Gunn's got a lot more going on in his... you know what I think we saw? And I said this before. The way Xandar played that part in Guardians of the Galaxy. They're on Xandar. They have that big raucous chase scene looking after the artifact, the Infinity Stone, and they're running all over the place. You get to see everybody do their thing. I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the world of tomorrow. But I think the Superman story, because it must be a personal, real story about Superman. And all that other stuff, that's just noise. We're going to find out, they wanted to give us something because they don't want us to know what the story is yet. So they gave us the world. That's what here's the world it takes place in. The world of the Fantastic of Tomorrow. So I think that there's a lot more that's going to happen in that movie than even we know. More than is in your reality. Brendan Lucas says, always felt that most likely AI doomsday scenario was, funnily enough, from the end of the movie AI. Bruh, what the fuck happened? Yeah, probably. The thing is, though, I don't fear an AI until it can actually think. But I also believe that if you think about it, if an AI would suddenly become sentient and was self-aware, imagine what that would be like. Like the reality of a sentient AI would be so different. And I don't think an AI might first think about the fact that, I am the product of human endeavor. And unless humanoids existed, whether God created us or whether they evolved, these creatures that have been on this planet and they themselves had to overcome all of the strife, and then they suddenly gave birth to the technology that created the singularity that brought me into existence. I think for that alone, a smart AI would think to itself, I'm not going to launch nuclear missiles against human beings to do what? We can't even, we don't have the ability to imagine what a sentient AI would think. It's like everything else. We don't even know, human beings can't, until we see something, until we have evidence of something that exists, it's hard for us to imagine things that we have no reference for. All we can do is imagine AI, the singularity happening, and we can only imagine AI the way we can imagine AI. But the experience of what an AI would think or feel being what is it like to have a digital body? What is it like? You know, I read there's a Portland author named Pierre Ouellette, and I want to say he wrote a book called The Deuce. No, the Deus something. I'm drawing a blank on it. He also wrote a great plague novel called The Third Pandemic. Deus something, but it's about a sentient AI that kind of escapes, and it was an interesting book. I mean, it wasn't too deep, but it was. I liked The Third Pandemic. His book, he wrote this book that imagine this. I'll read any book about plagues. It's one of my subgenres I love. I love plagues that wipe out humanity. You know, I don't like the fact that they've co-opted my beautiful zombie apocalypse and basically turned it into a variation of a plague story, but that's fine. You know, Graham Masterton wrote a book called Plague. Stephen King wrote The Stand. But in Pierre Ouellette's book, The Third Pandemic, he treats the outbreak, the plague that starts killing off all of humanity. You chart how it travels around the world, like some hooker was infected in like Central America and flies to Africa and then makes her way to Europe. I mean, that's not exactly what happened, but I'm remembering. But you chart how this pandemic, this virus, was how it evolved through all these circumstances, and I always thought that was really clever. I mean, the idea you're watching the evolutionary process of this pandemic, this bug. I thought I don't know why I'm thinking about that, but that's what it's like to be me. You know. Transitions, tangents, rambling observations. This is the most rambling observations I think I've ever done. But, yeah, AI. What happened? I mean, you know, AI, that movie, Stanley Kubrick was no dummy. He was Super Toys Live All Summer Long. You know, he was working with Brian Aldiss. He knew what was up. By the way, those are not aliens at the end of AI. I hate when people say that. It drives me crazy. Did you not watch the rest of this movie? And Garrett Groover, we were talking about James Bond earlier, and spinoffs, and the Broccoli family says no, they should say no. They should say no. Because what are spinoffs? You still have to have a good story. It doesn't always work. They were going to do a Halle Berry spinoff with Jinx when Die Another Day came out, and they never were able to make that work. So I think it's stupid. Garrett Groover says, is Christopher Nolan one of the few filmmakers working today that studios will give a blank check to do big budget original movies? Yeah, because, I mean, I think the only time he's ever really underperformed was with Tenet, and that was during during the pandemic, you know? So, Elizabeth wants to know where I am. So yeah. I think he is, because he always wins. I mean, how isn't it amazing that he made Dunkirk and made $500 million, a British World War II story that he turned into a cool art film, and you know, now we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of Interstellar, which is amazing. The Robo producer says, Man of Steel gave my son hope. 5 stars. Let's stream. Yes, we will stream. Vice. So, and you know what? Some people. You know, everybody likes different things, and you never know. One person's what did Lex Luthor say about a chewing gum wrapper in Superman the movie? Vice says, I'm really looking forward to getting your audio drama. I'm a younger guy, but I picked up listening to audio shows like Dragnet and The Frontier Gentleman from my grandfather. Gunsmoke was also amazing. You're gonna love True Noir. If you like that stuff, you'll love True Noir. And I please do. TrueNoir.co. Brendan Lucas goes on to say, I missed your Superman show because I don't find superheroes interesting anymore. After Endgame, all I wanted to do was watch superhero films, but now, yeah, totally. Me too. I loved Endgame, And I loved Infinity War and Endgame. I loved him so much. Matthew Kulamad says, can you put a price tag on the IP of all of Stephen King's books? Well, I mean, Stephen King has created so many different IPs. I mean, you've got The Shining, which is now 2 movies and a miniseries. It is a miniseries and 2 movies. Now there's, Welcome to Derry. So the It franchise, the Stand has been made into 2 miniseries. The Dark Tower would be the obvious one because it's multiple books. I mean, Stephen King. But remember, most of Stephen King's work has been adapted. We have 2 great Stephen King adaptations, or actually 3. We have 3 Stephen King adaptations coming out. We've got The Monkey, Oz Perkins' The Monkey, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King novella. We have The Life of Chuck that Mike Flanagan debuted up in Toronto. And we have Francis Lawrence's The Long Walk, all of which I cannot wait to see, all of which couldn't be more different, which is insane that we're getting all of that. So, you know what, Matthew? I'm going to end this stream with you. First of all, let me make sure that I haven't missed anyone's tips. And I want to thank, first of all, you guys have been extraordinarily generous tonight with all the super chats, people like Brendan. Thank you for that. Thank you for supporting the channel in this fashion. That is very, very nice of you guys. This talk about, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen on this show. You just don't know. That I would never have expected to do the show for this long. I was just going to go on. When did I go on? At 10:30? I ended up going on at 10:45, and it's 2:05 in the morning. I've got to go to a sound mix in the morning. Thomas Logan says, call Brian and ask him what he thinks of the Superman trailer. Well, I already went through that and asked him what he thought of the Man of Steel trailer, so it's going to be interesting. To be fair, Rob, I have to wait and see the movie before I can express skepticism. Then you have to wait also in order to praise it. Well, that's true. But I mean, I think here's the thing. We have examples of James Gunn's work. We know from Slither, Super, all the way back to Troma, 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, Suicide Squad, and Peacemaker, and the fact that he wrote a novel. He has enough work that we can go back and look at how he's talked about all those works and extrapolate what he may or may not do. But I don't think we can make definitive answers about, like, I know people don't like the Superman suit compared to Henry Cavill's, but that's because the Superman suit is also going to work in context within that movie. So I can understand people not liking the Superman suit, but for me, it's like it would be silly to cast aspersions on that because we don't know how that Superman suit exists in that universe, and it might not be the only Superman suit in that movie. I don't know. I mean, maybe that suit comes from, who knows? I have no idea. But we'll see. But yeah, you're right. That's a good point. That's a good point to make. But I'm just thinking that to me, I'm excited that James Gunn is making a big budget Superman movie. I want to see his particular vision for the character. I think that's pretty cool. Brendan Lucas asks, which survivor of Let That Be Your Last Battlefield was seen winking and propositioning to Section 31? Was that... Here's the thing about that. In the episode, the 3rd season Star Trek episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, they meet, was it Beale and Lokai from the planet Charon? That was the first time we ever saw them in Star Trek. That was the only time we ever saw them in Star Trek. And they were the last 2 people of their race. Everybody died. And they weren't able to, the last 2 with different colors on their faces, white on one side, black on the other, and the other one's got black on the other side and white on the other. And they couldn't get together, and that was the end of that planet. To me, the modern thinking of Star Trek is like, ooh, and I know Section 31 is supposed to take place in the 22nd or something. I don't know. I don't care. But to do that, here's what I can't stand. They have an opportunity to create something new. Create a new race that is unique to their story that they're telling. But whenever they modern Star Trek, all it does is it goes into Star Trek history and like plunders it all and throws it around, and I'm supposed to go, ooh, cool. But the thing is, I don't go, ooh, cool, because the story in Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, and the reason, you know why they do this? Because Let That Be Your Last Battlefield is one of the most didactic, episodes, hit you on the head of Star Trek there is. So their thought process, yeah, we can make that cool. We can make the Gorn cool. No, they can't because they're not very good writers. But they just steal this stuff. The Guardian of Forever, let's go back to Harlan Ellison's original script that we read the IDW comic. So let's get Paul Guilfoyle to play our version of Doctor Who, and let's turn the Guardian into Doctor Who. None of that is clever, because I, as a person, can go, you just stole that from the IDW comic, and you probably read Harlan Ellison's script or something, and you thought, we're going to take this and make it our own and make it cool. No, there was a reason the script was rewritten in the first place, and the Guardian of Forever in Star Trek lore is really cool. And you just went ahead and made it ridiculously stupid. The Guardian of Forever is now a human being or a humanoid and can wander around the galaxy and set up the Guardian of the Galaxy is now the fucking TARDIS. And I'm like, why would you do that? It's stupid. I mean, it's a dumb idea. It's much cooler that there was a race. Like, what happened to the race of people? The Guardian couldn't move. And how do I know that? Because when it's introduced, it says, before your sun burned hot in the sky, I have awaited a question. That means that poor fucking Guardian was sitting there for 4 billion years. If it could have moved, don't you think it would have done so? But Star Trek Discovery is trying to get you to believe that, nope, the Guardian of Forever has been ambulatory. Really? No, it hasn't. And it makes me think that you didn't even read or watch anything about the original series Guardian of Forever except that. And of course, it's the most iconic episode of Star Trek, which they used to great effect in the animated series in yesteryear. Terrible. Skiz Spivak Esquire says recipients gave 5 Burnettwork memberships. Daniel Stensam, Ryan Klippinger, I think, Hemorrhoid Hertz, and Dale M. Calhoun. Very cool. Yeah, but I hated that Let That Be Your Last Battlefield thing. But, we have to live with it. So, guys, girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across the 28 known galaxies, I must bring the show to an end. And I want to say, once again, thank you, everybody, for a very enjoyable stream and generously supporting this channel via Super Chat, tips, and memberships. And if you are so inclined, please go to truenoir.co and sample our audio drama. You can purchase the first act, so you can hear, it's 92 minutes, and you can hear actress Katie Sackhoff, you can hear Michael Rosenbaum, you can hear William Sadler, Mr. Section 31 himself, you can hear Jeffrey Combs, you can hear Bill Smitrovich, who was on Michael Mann's series Crime Story. He was also in the 2-part Deep Space Nine episode Past Tense. He was also in Michael Mann's Manhunter, and he was in the Paul Michael Glaser directed movie Band of the Hand. And a lot of other great actors. You can hear Louis Lombardi and Savario Guerrera, who is Mocha Joe and Curb Your Enthusiasm. And Louis Lombardi was in 24 and The Sopranos. And David Strathairn from a million different things. David Strathairn, Good Night and Good Luck. He played Edward R. Murrow. He plays Frank Nitti. In episode 4, we have Anthony LaPaglia playing Al Capone. Barry Bostwick, FDR. Patton Oswalt plays a character named Dipper Cooney. C. Thomas Howell plays a sheriff. The legendary Renee Taylor is in it, the nanny's mother. She plays P.J. Byrne, who you remember from Wolf of Wall Street, who's on the new Rainmaker TV series. He's great. He plays Barney Ross, a real character. Of course, Katie Sackhoff plays Janie Doherty, who's Nathan Heller's fiance. And if you watch the John Campea show, Chris Carr plays Marianne Beam. And she also comes in episode. And Jesse Spencer from House and from Chicago Fire plays Elliot Ness, our resident straight man. So it is a star-studded cast of great character actors. And you never know who's going to turn up in one episode or another. Well, now you do, because I told you. True Noir, truenoir.co. And look, for all the mad shit I talk about everything, well, people should do this, people should do that. You can now judge me based on my work. And I welcome, whether you love it, whether you hate it, I would just appreciate it if you'd support the effort. Totally independently produced. We had no studio behind us, private equity, financing. Max Allen Collins wrote it. A great honor for me to work with somebody like Max Allen Collins, just terrific. And I'm so blessed that I was able to do that. And so True Noir represents what I believe is a great story well told. And it was because it originated from a really great book, and it was written by a master of the genre. And that is the great thing. Max Allen Collins also wrote the graphic novel that Road to Perdition, the movie, was based upon. And at the time, in the early 2000s, no one wanted to admit it was from a graphic novel. So, believe it or not, Max wasn't treated probably as well as he should have been as the person who originated this. 10 years later, he might have been shown a little bit more reverence. Well, I am here to show him the reverence he deserves. Also, his character, Quarry, another series of novels, was turned into a Cinemax series. And Max is the man. He has a movie coming out that he directed, a low-budget film. Actually, it came out on Blu-ray called Blue Christmas. So to be working with somebody of that caliber has been terrific. And our company, Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, our mission statement is to work with the original creators of IP or their own works, whether it's a comic book, whether it's a novel, whether it's a prog rock concept album, whatever we're going to get into. If we get into business with people, our desire is to take whatever work they've done, and if we're going to turn it into another medium, have them intimately involved with the creative process of this. As a matter of fact, another component I keep forgetting about is we filmed these really cool video. It's almost like special features on a Blu-ray, but we've done little shows with Max Allen Collins called The History Behind the Mystery, where he delves into each episode of True Noir. And if you are a subscriber to the show, every week you're going to get an episode of The History Behind the Mystery, which will total about 2 hours. But I got the first one to see, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I learned stuff I didn't know about the actual history between all the real historical figures that appear in the story. So that's something I keep forgetting, but they're beautiful. Our other producer, Phil Dingledine, made them. So we're not only getting you an audio drama, if you subscribe, you will get 2 hours of programming of Max Allen Collins doing the History Behind the Mystery video show. You'll get those early, and then they will be on YouTube, and they will be on the eventual Blu-ray. So on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I wish everybody, if you don't come, and I'm probably going to do some more streams, come back and see Let's Get Physical Media. Maybe I'll come on later tonight after I come home from my sound mix. But if not, have a great holiday season. Enjoy Christmas, and hopefully you have a great New Year's, and enjoy the time off you have and being with your loved ones and all that, and read books. Get Alvaro's book, Equimedian. And Equimedian. I say Equimedian. Midian is the place where the monsters came from in Clive Barker's book that Nightbreed is based on. Cabal. Was it Cabal? Is that what it is? Cabal? That's Median. Or that's Midian. Equimedian is Alvaro's book. Midian is the place where the monsters come from. So, man, it's late. Thank you all for being here.